Chapter 347. At this moment, thousands of possibilities flashed through Kudrin's mind. For a moment, Kudrin was almost certain that this was a conspiracy. The timing was too coincidental. The Eagle Nest Mountain was attacked and you came. I didn't even ask for help. Duque's speed was faster than those death merchants who came to resell arms when they smelled the scent of war. The next second, Kudrin smiled bitterly. The Wildhammer dwarves knew that the entire Lordaeron continent was in a mess. The Wildhammer dwarves were not a completely isolated race. Even the merchants who frequented the Eagle Nest Mountain had told the Wildhammer dwarves that the entire continent was at war. From the Silverpine Forest in the west to the Hillsbrad Hills in the middle, and then to the Earthy Highlands in the east. However, the Wildhammer dwarves had always been aloof from worldly affairs, which made them subconsciously reject the news that war was approaching. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, he had received a long letter from Magni Bronzebeard. The letter detailed the orcs' unreasonable territorial claims and the most barbaric acts of genocide. All resistance was executed. Even if they surrendered, the dwarven slaves who were too troublesome or could not afford to keep them were executed. Supervisors were executed when they were in a bad mood. These barbaric green-skinned creatures did not care about the lives of people outside of their own race. Or rather, they did not even care about the lives of their own people. Unfortunately, this was not a good feeling. On one side, there were bandits who aggressively invaded his garden, and on the other side, there was a treaty that was almost like an alliance. Duque saw Kudrin's embarrassment. No, Great Wildhammer King. We are not the only ones here. At the request of Magni Bronzebeard, one of the leaders of the Alliance, 50,000 elite soldiers of the Alliance have been arrayed on the border of the hinterlands. As long as you allow it, the warriors of the Alliance will definitely defeat these invaders for the Wildhammer tribe. Don't worry, there are no additional conditions. Dwarves were people who could be persuaded by reason, but not by force. Coercion and bribery would only make them give you a gun, and they would rather fight to the death with the orcs than beg for mercy. Duque's method of inducing people to join the alliance made the Wildhammer dwarves much more comfortable. All right, in the name of the Wildhammer King, I accept the goodwill of the alliance. As long as what my relative said is true, the Wildhammer dwarves will join your alliance. Duke smiled and immediately sent a magic message. Elucia, let General Seamus advance at top speed. The Stormwind elites who were already prepared for a rapid march abandoned all food and military supplies, and only brought their weapons and equipment with them, as they trotted into the hinterlands. In the sky, Duke hugged Servana's slender waist as Queen Sylvanas rained arrows down on the horde that was running on the ground. At the same time, Duke used the system elf scanning ability to mark out the trolls hiding in the forest, and quickly killed them with magic. Yet there were too many of war. The tribes that covered the mountains and plains swarmed towards Eagle Nest Mountain, without any formation. Of Wildhammer the horde. Of horde the tribes. Under the command of General Seamus, the well-trained elite soldiers of the Stormwind Kingdom moved slowly. Under the command of General Seamus, the well-trained Stormwind elites moved slowly. Only after the tribe had been baptized by the javelins thrown out from behind the shield wall would they be qualified to face the terrifying shield wall. Only after the horde was hit by the spears thrown from behind the shield wall would they have the right to face this terrifying shield wall. Behind the 2 rows of sword and shield soldiers were 3 rows of pikemen. They repeatedly thrust and retracted their pikes, ensuring that any orc would have to face more than 6 pikes at the same time. This was definitely beyond the limits of the orcs' martial arts. The orcs slammed into the shield wall. Some parts of the shield wall had collapsed. The defenders there were unable to completely block the orcs' charge. The rain of spears gave the warriors time to repair their formation. They quickly stepped over their fallen comrades and filled the gaps in the formation. The trolls on the other side also threw spears. These primitive and crude stone spears did cause a lot of trouble for the humans. At least, the penetration of these spears was limited. They could not compare to the penetration of metal spears. When Seamus ordered the warriors to increase the number of warriors to 3, the formation was finally stabilized. The waves of orcs crashed into the shield wall. Less of it was destroyed, In contrast, the Horde suffered a greater blow. When the third wave of Horde arrived, the FFF flamethrower team arrived and taught the Horde a lesson. Originally, General Seamus was already prepared to fight a fierce battle. However, after the first wave of attacks, he was shocked to find that the people rushing out of the forest with weapons in their hands were actually the tribe's laborers. Even though these laborers had decent fighting spirit, how could their fighting strength compare to a standard orc warriors? Not to mention the elites of the Blackrock tribe. Their height, strength, and speed were all reduced. This made the battle more like a civil war between two human kingdoms. When the sun set, there were 40,000 orc corpses on the battlefield at the foot of Eagle's Nest Mountain. A glorious victory. On the battlefield, the dwarven warriors who were fighting on the front line all let out excited cheers. Their new allies, the human warriors, smiled faintly. They did not seem very excited. What? Humans don't even celebrate a victory now? A dwarf warrior asked. Believe me, as long as it's a human warrior wearing the griffin emblem, every single one of them has killed 2 digits of orcs. We've definitely seen more orcs than you have. But the orc laborers that came today cannot make us excited. An elite warrior of the Griffin Legion replied. 2 hours later, Kudrin Wildhammer received Duque and his party in the throne room of Eagle's Nest Mountain. He had thought that the leaders of the humans were mostly old-fashioned old men. Obviously, his preconceived notions were wrong. Apart from a human general in his 40s or 50s, everyone present looked too young. Duke Marcus, a young man with a clean-shaven chin and a pair of deep black eyes, wore a blue and white mage robe. He was their commander. Then there was a fellow who gave off a gentle golden glow and called himself a holy knight. Finally, there was an elf girl with a wild and rebellious temperament. Although Kudrin didn't think she was cute, her valiant and beautiful appearance still won Kudrin's favor. It was rare for Kudrin to see so many special people. He was especially happy when Duque brought over a dozen barrels of wine. Now he was very happy to get to know these people. Dwarves were only brothers with men who could drink. Kudrin made up his mind. Regardless of whether Duque was weak or not, those who could drink were brothers. Chapter 348. Welcome, welcome, boys and girls. He gestured for them to sit on the arranged chairs. You are very welcome. We were very worried that the greenskins would destroy our homeland. Ancestors above, even if they were laborers with low combat power, there were still too many of them. Fortunately, your arrival put an end to everything. We the Wildhammer dwarves are very grateful. Hello, please allow me to formally introduce myself. I am Duke Marcus, the current vice commander of the Alliance, and the highest commander of this army. Duque patiently explained about the tribe, everything the orcs had done, and talked about the fate of Stormwind City. Finally, Duque decisively used the moral integrity of a Mediv. At this moment, Duque's body was covered in a holy radiance. It was a kind of affinity that was easily recognized. Kudrin, will you and your tribesmen join our alliance? Kudrin frowned and pulled at his beard. He once again took out the letter that Magni gave him. The content that he had always felt was unreliable jumped out of the paper, mixed with Duque's explanation, and entered his imagination. Just like today, a green tide flooded Cosmodin. The crude greenskins took control of the mines and plundered all the iron ores there. The huge black iron warships carried the cannons of Kurtira's fleet and proudly crossed the sea. The green calamity engulfed the entire continent. After all the information and what they saw with their own eyes, the truth of the matter made Kudrin and the other Wildhammer dwarves tremble. Indeed, Kudrin let out a long sigh. We the Wildhammers had a lot of conflicts with the Bronzebeard tribe. That was the reason for the terrible War of the Three Hammers. This is also why we left Cosmodin, but they are still our brothers, our tribesmen. When Kudrin said this, Duque already felt that there was hope. These dirty greenskins, this damned tribe, first attacked our brothers and plundered their land and the ores that have been passed down for thousands of years. Yes, ores are the dwarves' wealth and lives. Now they came to attack us. It was all thanks to your timely reinforcements that we were able to escape the fate of having our home destroyed. At this point, Kudrin suddenly changed the topic. That's right. I don't really like the timing of your support. But, Duque raised his eyebrows. But the threat these filthy creatures pose to the entire world is real. And you have indeed saved Eagle Nest Mountain. Kudrin slammed his hand on the armrest of his chair. Of course, we will join the alliance. We must work together to annihilate these orcs, until they become pitiful creatures that can no longer pose a threat to anyone. He stood up and extended his hand to Duque. Without a doubt, you will receive Wildhammer's assistance. Duque reached out his hand and quickly bared his teeth. Damn it, this Kudrin is so petty. Why did he use so much strength? His hand was almost crushed. Kudrin suddenly laughed evilly. But the dwarves hate hypocrisy the most. There will definitely be Wildhammer's assistance, but how much more will depend on your ability. A certain Wildhammer king crooked his finger, and a group of short dwarves carried the wine that Duke had delivered and ran up to him, huffing and puffing. 10 barrels of wine were lined up in a row. Kudrin slapped one of the barrels. Come, don't play tricks. King against king, general against general. Every time we drink a glass, if you are drunk by me, I will give half of the Griffin Knights. If you have the ability to let me go, I will bring all the Griffin Knights with me. Of course, you have the right to refuse. At the end of the sentence, it was completely a threat. A pain-in-the-ass threat. Duque subconsciously glanced at the corner of his eyes. At this moment, the Stormwind General star was shining brightly. Gavinrad Doom, one of the 5 paladins of the first generation. Reginald Windsor, who would later become a marshal. Tom Seamus, who died in the original history, but would definitely be one of the first to become a marshal after his resurrection. Now all the generals simultaneously took a step back. Their movements were neat, as if they had practiced it countless times. Damn, even if they don't have the spirit of brotherhood, there should be a pattern, right? Duque's eyeballs almost popped out. And there is still one who didn't retreat. Before Duque's joy subsided, he immediately realized that the guy was Queen Sylvanas. Sylvanas raised his long golden eyebrows. His face clearly said, "What does it have to do with me when you men compete in drinking? Master, you can celebrate in peace. I will be responsible for taking you back to the bedroom to ensure that you will not do anything that will violate the alliance's etiquette and Duke identity." The little maid Vanessa, who rushed over to follow the army this time, made a proper lady's bow. But why are there dozens of coiled ropes hanging around your waist? Once I'm drunk, you will tie me up like a dumpling, right? Oh hell, are you the master or am I the master? At this time, Kudrin's image began to enlarge infinitely in Duque's vision. It was already bigger than the dwarf's avatar. That was definitely a demon king's body size and pressure. Kudrin stood up, pulled out Duque's hand with a serious, lying expression, held it, and stuffed it into a huge wooden barrel-shaped wine glass. It was filled with fragrant wine. As the king of Wildhammers, I represent the 50,000 compatriots of the Eagle Nest Mountain to thank you, Duque. To the friendship between dwarves and humans, cheers. He said a lot of words of thanks, but it actually meant only one thing. You damn brat, drink it. He only said this sentence, but it was enough. The group of bastards behind him also raised their glasses. To the Alliance. Alliance my ass. In order to please the dwarves, I poured alcohol into the sweet fruit wine that the dwarves like to drink. Duque's face turned pale. What does it mean to be caught in one's own trap? If you don't seek death, why do I have to seek death for no reason? When Duque raised his glass with a bitter face, the demon king of the wine table, Kudrin, said, I'll drink first, you take your time, but remember to be fair. After that, Demon King Kudrin drank at least 500 milliliters of the so-called fruit wine, with at least 50% alcohol in 3 seconds. Great! This is King good wine. Hell, what I drank before was simply horse piss. Duque was just a college student before he traveled to another world. He had never entered society, and he was not a table warrior who had experienced the test of alcohol. Although his body was not bad after traveling to another world, it was only average without special training. Suddenly, Duque had to face the Demon King Kudrin. Duque wanted to cry. Duque secretly cried in his heart. Why didn't I catch Lothar according to the original history? With Lothar as the scapegoat, it won't be my turn no matter what. Just as the wine entered his throat, a miracle happened. Chapter 349. The System Elf appeared. Dear host, do you want to drink 1,000 cups without getting drunk? Nonsense. Do you have any good ideas? Physical ones. I can stimulate the growth of alcohol-dispelling enzymes in the host's body, making it harder for the host to get drunk. I can increase the host's alcohol tolerance by 5,000%, but at the cost of the host's stamina. Stop talking, let's do it. Less than 3 seconds after Kudrin finished his drink, Duke also finished his big cup with a gurgling sound. Come on. Who's afraid of you? Duque directly flipped the big cup over, and only a few drops of wine dripped down, indicating that he had drunk it all. For a moment, the crowd was in an uproar. Was Duque hiding his true colors? Or was he just acting rashly, and showing his true colors later? Miss Alicia Barov looked at the huge wine barrel in confusion, as if she was tempted by the fragrance of the wine. Alicia waved her hand and naturally, a dwarf maid helped to pour the wine. Alicia only took a small sip. At first, she felt that it was a little sweet, but in just a short minute, the overbearing alcohol spread from her stomach, and a warm current rose from her chest to her head. God, what wine is this? Alicia almost couldn't stand it. On the other side, when Kudrin saw that Duque didn't get drunk after 1 cup, the brute Hammer King was very unhappy. After all, he almost choked himself. He thought to himself, you can drink so much even though you're a pretty boy. Then why did you pretend that you couldn't drink just now? I just don't like that you humans have so many tricks. If I don't get you drunk today, my surname isn't Brute Hammer. Come, let's drink to our heart's content. A barrel of wine, even if it was a small one, was at least 10 liters, and it was quickly finished by Kudrin and Duque. It was true that Kudrin was talented. Duke on the other side was equally unfathomable. Most of the people around him who were drinking with him were swaying left and right, and the few that didn't die fighting on the table were also a little drunk. However, the 2 fellows in the middle of the field swayed and did not fall. Hey, Duque, don't you think we're going to stop like this? Kudrin wiped the wine off his beard and accidentally rubbed it on his eyebrows. Well, old man Kudrin, how about something more exciting? Duque elegantly wiped his mouth with a napkin, then poked the tip of his nose with his finger. Mix wine? That's the inevitable second stage, it's not exciting. Kudrin raised his hand. Bring me all the models on my military map. And my baby. Soon, a large number of Griffin Knight models were placed on the table. From now on, I'll put in an additional squad of 8 Griffin Knights for every round. In exchange, you have to give me 10 more barrels of this wine. No problem. I'm not done yet. From now on, we'll drink together. Each round had to be different from the previous one. And we play dice. What dice? Seeing a dwarf servant bring a dice the size of a fist, Duque could not help but laugh. Damn, should I say it's common for alcoholics in every world? He saw that each side of the dice had different contents written on it. On it were the words, as much as you want. 1 cup? 2 cups. And of course, the most terrifying one was the table clear. Now, there were at least 20 different kinds of wine on the table. At that moment, Duque's 100,000 alpacas were running wildly in his heart. He even wanted to die. 5,000% increase in alcohol-reducing enzyme sounded like a lot. But if he was weak, 5,000% was 50 times. And 50 times was only 250. 1 table clear was definitely enough to kill him. Hee. You can only drink 1 cup in each round. But drinking 1 cup is only considered as breaking even. You have to drink a different cup before you can throw the dice. The cup on the dice is what the opponent wants to drink. The opponent can only start their own round after they finish drinking. At that moment, Duque did not want to know anything. At that moment, he just wanted to make a phone call. Call a mage to send a message to Lothar. If he died because of alcohol poisoning, would it be considered as a work injury? The cruel battle began. Duque attacked first. His face was dark, and after drinking 2 cups, Kudrin was only hit with as much as you want. This shameless brute Hammer King actually only took a small sip in order to cheat him to drink. Wasting an opportunity would bring retribution. Kudrin attacked from the back and hit Duque with 5 cups. Seeing that the situation was not in his favor, Duque decisively cheated. He let the system elf control his muscles and threw a table clear at Kudrin. However, life with cheats did not need to be explained. Kudrin actually did not fall. He actually did not fall. After the wine on the table was refilled, he very shamelessly returned a table clear to Duque. Duque was defeated, just a little bit more. Looking at the system notification that said, "You still need 1% more alcohol before you will be completely drunk," Duke was stunned as he held on. He continued to cheat and returned another table clear. This time, the wine table demon Kudrin finally showed signs of not being able to hold on. He almost used all his strength to give Duque another cup. At that moment, the Alliance's wine table commander Duke Marcus, with the most tragic expression, drank the cup of wine and then collapsed. The winner has been decided? No. Under the cheers of the brute hammer dwarves, Kudrin raised his cup high, but he could not drink even half a drop. At that moment, Kudrin seemed to be possessed by something. He loudly sang a majestic and lonely song. "This body is the bone of wine. Blood infuses wine. Heart is like a wine jar. Undefeated in countless wineries. Never retreating in defeat. Never had a confidant. I often stand alone on top of an empty wine barrel, drunk in lonely victories. Yet only nothingness is left. Then this body is destined to be born for wine, to fight for a drinking buddy." After singing, the cup in his hand fell to the ground. "I declare from today onwards, Duque is my brother." With that, the wine table demon Kudrin Wildhammer collapsed. He let out a thunderous snoring sound. It was actually a tie. Kudrin, who could single-handedly defeat an entire team of opponents in a drinking contest, was actually tied with the young human mage Duque. One could imagine that Duque's name would spread throughout the entire Eagle Nest Mountain in a single night. Yes, that's right. Duque led the army to save the Eagle Nest Mountain, but his name might not be known by everyone. But Duque defeated Kudrin at the wine table, so Duque's name was destined to spread throughout the dwarven world. The dwarves' worldview was so strange. Only those who could fight and drink the most would be famous. They found that no one was still standing at the guest and host seats. The aftermath teams from both sides came out to clean up the battlefield and pick up their respective corpses. A dwarven auntie who seemed to be Kudrin's wife threw Kudrin onto a small cart and pushed him away like she was about to dump garbage. Vanessa dragged Duque's leg and dragged him away like a dead dog. Chapter 350. A drunk man weighed a ton. This was the common thought of every woman who had no choice but to serve a drunk man. The only fortunate thing was that as soon as he left the room, Duque's knights came up to carry the most expensive drunkard in the alliance. Leave it to us from here to the VIP room. Cassar Ulysses, who had been chosen as the captain of the knights, smiled as he took Duque. With the alliance operating well and winning every victory, it was not an exaggeration to say that Duque was the most important person in the alliance. There was even a slightly exaggerated saying that the Sword Saint of the Fireblade clan could assassinate anyone. As long as Duque was still around, the alliance would not collapse. Cassar and another knight each held onto Duque's arms, while 12 fully armed knights escorted Duque to the room in the state guest house. Before entering the room, Vanessa's expression and appearance were elegant and in line with the image of a maid. But when the two knights placed the drunkard Duque on the bed and said, "Miss Van Cleef, I will leave the lord to you." This sentence made Vanessa blush for no reason. Thump thump. Her heart was beating so fast. She did not think much of it at first, but after hearing what those two fellows said, she felt that something was going to happen. Along the way, she had heard too many terrible stories of the nobles bullying and humiliating their maids. Living teaching material for the young masters of the nobles, lovers of the counts. Almost subconsciously, Vanessa pulled up her maid's skirt. Of course, it was not for benefits, but purely to make it easier to pull out the throwing knife tied to her thigh. In the next moment, Vanessa felt that she was really an idiot. Damn it, if I really hurt Duque, my dad will be the first to kill me, Vanessa muttered. One had to know that in the past New Year, Edwin Van Cleef made a trip back to South Shore. He talked incessantly to her about the progress in the Western Wilderness. According to Duque's arrangements, he and Gillian Stallman had successfully established a base in the mines of Moon Creek in the Western Wilderness. Not only did they succeed in saving more than 2,000 people under the noses of the tribe and safely sending them to South Shore, they also gained a foothold in the mines. Using the complicated terrain of the mine, we killed more than 500 orcs, and we only lost less than 30 people. That's why we decided to name it the Dead Mines. This means that it's the grave of all beast men. Edwin did not know that he had made history take an interesting turn. Dead Mines had appeared in advance, but in a different form, a form that was more righteous and glorious. Vanessa, I heard about Master Marcus's feat another several 100,000 beast men. Oh, by the holy light. I think Master's wisdom is almost on par with Thoradin the Great, a hero who fought against the evil alien race in the human world. But can you imagine? If something bad happens to him, how can I, Gary and Reginald, and the other ministers continue to be loyal to our master? Lucien thought to himself. Oh, just thinking about it breaks my heart. Vanessa was speechless when she felt her father's fanatical worship of Duque. Vanessa was still young, and did not have much of a sense of Duque's greatness. At most, she felt that Duque was very powerful. The problem was that her father wanted to gift his daughter a gift. Remembering that she was already 14 years old, soon to be the generally accepted age of 15 for marriage, Vanessa felt conflicted. The only fortunate thing was that although her father's hints were very obvious, he was still a father who doted on his daughter, and did not directly force her. The memory ended. All right, here's the problem. What if Duque went berserk and she gave in? Or not? Feeling extremely conflicted, Vanessa poked Duke's rather handsome face with her index finger. Huff huff huff. He breathed evenly. This bullshit Grand Duke's alcohol tolerance was pretty good. At least he didn't go berserk after getting drunk. Nor did he go berserk. Squatting at the head of the bed, she looked at Duque's calm and youthful face. She could not imagine that this ridiculously young man was the core figure of the Alliance who controlled hundreds of thousands of soldiers, and the future of the entire human race. What if seems not? Before Vanessa could finish talking to herself, she suddenly heard a commotion at the door. Let me in. I have the most urgent matter to look for Duque. It was a female voice that Vanessa was familiar with. My apologies, His Excellency Vice Commander just had a drinking contest with His Majesty Kidron Wildhammer, and is now dead drunk. If there's anything, please talk tomorrow. This was the voice of the Knight Captain Casa. Clearly, he and his men were blocking the way. By the sun, well, how can he get drunk at this time? No, I have to see him. I can't wait a second longer. Get out of the way, even if you have to splash him with water to wake him up. This was the voice of another woman. Most of the Wildhammer dwarves' houses were built in caves. In the entire state guest house, apart from a secret exit for escape, there was only one main door. When Vanessa opened the door, she saw the Windrunner sisters arguing with the knights. Yes, not only Servanas, but also Aurelia, who seemed to have just rushed back, looking travel-worn. Their quarrel alarmed many people. Gavinrad and Reginald, who didn't drink much, and Alicia, who didn't drink much, came out. Looking at this scene, Alicia suddenly remembered Duke's shocking plan, and she had an epiphany. This situation is probably within your expectations, right? But have you ever thought that you will get drunk? Alicia gently brushed her black hair, the corners of her mouth curving into a cute smile. She rarely gave a fake order. Master Marcus said that if the Windrunner sisters want to come, let them in. If Sir Ulysses is not at ease, you can also let the Windrunner sisters remove their weapons and enter. Of course, Sir Ulysses can also come in. Everyone knew that Duque and Aurelia had a special relationship, but no one said it out loud. In fact, weapons were not the main point. With such an important matter at hand, Aurelia very nimbly removed her longbow and the ranger's dagger, and handed them to the accompanying elven ranger. She and Servanas almost rushed into the room, and then saw Vanessa standing by Duque's bed. Vanessa said, "Sorry, sir is very drunk. If possible, I don't even want you to wake him up. In fact, he can't do anything even if he is awake." Aurelia's face, which was always full of confidence, always dignified, and always in high spirits, almost collapsed in an instant. "Oh my God! Cule Salis is about to be attacked. You're actually drunk?" Chapter 351. It was a sense of despair, as if the sky was falling. At a time like this, every minute and second was crucial to their survival. Who would have thought that Duque, who was the key, would actually die from drunkenness at this time? Cule Salis, even General Seamus, who had just rushed over, was a little confused. They had just driven the horde out of the hinterlands and made the Wildhammer dwarves' homeland safe. Did they just say that something had happened to Cule Salis? Duque did not tell too many people about his divine foresight. In the imaginations of generals like Windsor and Seamus, perhaps the horde would turn back to Hillsbrad, or go directly to Lordaeron, or go to the north and recruit those dirty trolls into the horde, then look for opportunities. No one had thought that this side division of the horde would give up on the holy city of Stratholme, which was not far to the northwest, and planned to go straight north to attack Cule Salis. General Seamus shook his head hard, trying to get rid of the drunkenness in his brain. "Lady Aurelia, are you sure that the main force of the horde is going to Cule Salis?" "My God, I confirmed it with my own eyes. Only a small number of orcs and trolls stayed here. The rest have all turned north. At least 50,000 orcs and trolls have passed through the hinterlands forest. They are crossing the mountains and continuing to the northern plains." Aurelia looked at the faces of the Alliance generals with a nervous and pained expression. "You still don't know this? Didn't Duque tell you about his foresight?" For a moment, the Alliance, no, to be precise, the generals from Stormwind all had strange expressions on their faces. General Seamus, the commander of the Griffin Legion, and the deputy commander-in-chief of the Alliance, who was going to Eagle Nest Mountain, stroked his beard. "First question. Since Lord Marcus told you about his foresight, and you left the Alliance early to warn Cule Salis, why didn't Cule Salis fight himself? As far as I know, Cule Salis could fight the trolls for thousands of years. It shouldn't be that he can't even stop 50,000 orcs, right?" Aurelia's face instantly turned pale. She simply did not want to recall what had happened to her in Silvermoon City. That day happened to be the day of the meeting between the king and the Silvermoon Council. Aurelia barged in. Logically speaking, as a mere ranger general, she was not allowed to enter without being summoned. But her roar silenced the guard at the gate. "Nearly 100,000 orcs and trolls are on their way to Cule Salis. And you want me to wait outside the door?" She used her reputation and aura to overwhelm the guard. Under the protection of 4 royal guards, Aurelia barged into the meeting room. The decorations in the Silvermoon Council Hall were very beautiful. Between the gorgeous gold and the warm fiery red, there were tall white jade pillars and walls. Every decoration and curtain here was a priceless work of art. If any one of them leaked out to the human world, it would cause all the nobles to fight over it, and it would be auctioned off at an unimaginable price. Aurelia was not in the mood to appreciate it. She completely ignored the huge red kite shields of the 4 guards beside her, ignored the long double-headed scimitars in their hands, and did not have the mood to see how the Silvermoon Council, one of the rulers of the High Elves, reacted. Many of the rulers of the High Elves stood up from their chairs, surprised by her intrusion. From beginning to end, Aurelia's attention was only focused on one person, Anastrian Sunstrider, the king of the High Elves. "What's going on?" Anastrian asked his chief guard. The chief guard looked embarrassed. He could only grit his teeth and shake his head. The High Elf king was already old, very old even for an elf. His long hair had turned white, and his skin was like parchment, like a piece of withered wood. He already looked very weak, but his blue eyes still revealed a trace of majesty, and his voice was also full of majesty. Aurelia instinctively wanted to retreat under his anger, but then she remembered why she was here. She straightened her back. I am Aurelia Windrunner, she announced loudly. Even though she knew that most of the council members recognized her. She announced loudly. Even though she knew that most of the council members recognized her. I followed the orders of His Majesty the Sunstrider, and supported the son of Emperor Saladin. I fought alongside the humans in the Hillsbrad Hills, and the earthy highlands in many battles. Then I came back here with a very serious message. Aurelia tried to use the most serious tone to attract the attention of the council members. Unfortunately, she still frowned, because she felt that the council members did not care. She could only bite the bullet and continue. The tribe that the humans warned us about is real and extremely powerful. Most of them are strong orcs that are 8 feet tall, and weigh more than 400 pounds. But there are some other creatures, such as the forest trolls. Aurelia's words finally caused some reaction, mixed with gasps and curses. Anger was natural. Perhaps no one among the arrogant high elves knew what the orcs were. In fact, even Aurelia did not know before the battle in South Shore. That was not important. What was important was that every council member present knew what the trolls were. Many of them, including His Majesty Anastrian, had participated in the Troll War that lasted for hundreds of years 4,000 years ago. However, the troll card seemed to have the opposite effect. You said that the trolls have joined that tribe? A great lord laughed loudly. That's great. Let the trolls follow this tribe you mentioned to fight the humans. I hope they will go far away. Maybe the humans will help us kill them all. Ha 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 ha. Wanton laughter echoed in the council hall. Many of the elven council members laughed and clapped in agreement. You don't understand what kind of disaster is happening on the continent at this moment. Aurelia roared angrily. She recalled Duque's deduction and said directly, the tribe is not a distant problem that we can ignore and laugh at. Their chief has personally led at least 50,000 elite orcs to the north of the hinterlands, 500 kilometers away. They are planning to conquer the entire world of Azeroth. That includes us here in Kuel Salis. Moreover, the orcs have an agreement with the ancestral gold. They will come. Within a week. Aurelia slammed the round table of the council. The violent bangs finally made the council members stop laughing. Then let them come. Another elven mage lord from Darkon mocked. No one can survive after passing through the forest's runestones. But the warlocks of the tribe. Enough. Aurelia Windrunner. Anastrian slammed the table hard. The runestones are still there. If the enemies you speak of really exist, they are still hundreds of kilometers away. We cannot let your people fall into panic, just because of your deduction. I promise to pay attention to this matter. But you, get out now. Chapter 352. In the state guest house in Eagle Nest Mountain, in front of Duque's bed, Aurelia recounted her experience in Silvery Moon City in a voice that was close to tears. No one wanted to believe me. They blindly believed in the defense of Longsong Forest. They believed that the beastmen would rather go to Stratholme and fight the humans to the death than believe that Orgrim would lead his army to Silvery Moon City. They even thought that I had been bribed by the humans and was deliberately spreading panic in order to force Kuel Salis to join the alliance. The Silvery Moon Council forbade all evacuation operations. The only thing I could do was to have my rangers step up their patrols at the border. Once upon a time, Aurelia had a unique glow around her. It was the glow of a warhorse that was eager to go on the battlefield. Now Aurelia was like a defeated rooster. Not only had her beautiful feathers fallen, but she had also suffered a heavy blow to her heart. The saddest thing was not to perish because of the unknown, but because she knew that a tragedy was bound to happen, but she was powerless to stop it. Not to mention Aurelia. Even Seamus and Windsor believed in Duque's calculations. Believing was one thing, and agreeing to take action was another. General Seamus pondered for a long time before saying, Lady Aurelia, I suggest that you don't make things difficult for Lord Marcus. How can you say that? Sylvanas almost wanted to punch Seamus in return. Seamus raised his hands. I have no intention of watching a tragedy happen. First, we have to be sure of one thing. If this tragedy does happen, it will not be on Lord Marcus or the Alliance. Do you understand? The Windrunner sisters' facial muscles twitched slightly. Their mouths moved for a long time before they finally nodded weakly. Secondly, as a general of the Alliance and a general of Stormwind, I object to Lord Duke Marcus leading his army into Cuel Salis before Cuel Salis asks for help from the Alliance. This is a matter of principle. Today, we can use the orcs as an excuse to send troops into the High Elven Kingdom. Tomorrow, another country can use the excuse of clearing out bandits to enter the borders of a third country. This is a very bad precedent. The faces of the Windrunner sisters turned pale. At this time, General Seamus added, "Of course, the final decision is in the hands of Sir Marcus. But before he makes his final decision, I will remind him once again that power and responsibility are equal." With that, Seamus saluted and left Duque's room. Not only him, but all the men also left the room. Only the drunk Duque, Vanessa, Alicia, and the Windrunner sisters were left. "All right, we have to wake Duque up first." Sylvanas was about to say boy, but she swallowed the second half of her words. However, her action was still not respectful at all, because Queen Sylvanas actually picked up a bucket of ice water used to chill wine. To her surprise, Vanessa pulled up her skirt and revealed the throwing knives. And Alicia's magic circuit quickly turned, condensing an ice cone suspended in midair. As the master's maid, although I don't like him, I can't let you do anything to the master. As half a disciple of Sir Marcus, I also can't allow you to disrespect the master. If it was any other time, Queen Sylvanas might have dealt with them. This was a sensitive time. A group of fully armed knights were listening outside the thin door. They would rush in at the slightest sign of trouble and chase the sisters out without hesitation. The worst thing was the relationship between Cuel Salis and the Alliance. Because he refused to join the alliance between the elves and humans had already regressed to the point where it almost existed in name only. Don't look at how these arrogant and valiant soldiers treated the Windwalker sisters with respect before. If something happened to Duke, they would be the first ones to react. Aurelia pulled her sister and bowed gracefully. "Sorry, we have no intention of hurting Duque. But the situation is urgent. I would like to ask, what do you allow us to use to wake him up?" "You can't hurt him," Vanessa replied immediately. "No pain." Alicia cared more about Duque from the bottom of her heart. The Windrunner sisters were dumbfounded. "I'll go first." Sylvanas walked over confidently and pinched Duque's nose. Duque stopped breathing. 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds, suddenly Duque vomited. A large amount of sour and rancid vomit flew out of his mouth. Queen Sylvanas was startled and jumped away. Fortunately, there was a wizard here. Aluhia cast a small ice cone spell that lasted less than a millisecond, blowing Duke's vomit out of the bed and freezing it on the ground with ice elements. Vanessa glared fiercely at Sylvanas. "You are not allowed to touch him again." After saying that, Vanessa went to clean up the frozen vomit. Alicia gently wiped the corner of Duque's mouth with a warm towel. But her eyes were warning Aurelia. Illyria was helpless. Why did she have to run into such a thing? She could only walk over and sit by the bed, shaking Duque's arm. "Duque, wake up. Cuel Salis is really in danger as you predicted. I need your help, Duque. Duque." Huff, huff, huff. A dead pig was sleeping soundly. Aurelia was going crazy. She shook Duque hard. But Duque did not wake up no matter what. Vanessa put her hands on her hips. "According to my experience with my father's friends, Master will not wake up until tomorrow noon." Tomorrow noon? The main force led by Orgrim had already left for the northern part of the hinterlands a day earlier. The orcs were fast to begin with. Even if they immediately chased after them in the middle of the night, they might not be able to catch up. Tomorrow noon? If the human army really went to the Longsong Forest, they might only be able to collect the corpses of the elves. Unknowingly, Aurelia's shaking became more and more urgent, and her body moved closer to Duque. Duque was in a deep sleep, so deep that even the system elf could not wake him up. In his sweet dreams, he unknowingly had a dream. It was a dream related to his 10 terabytes action movie. The girl in the dream was so hot. Just as he was about to do something dirty, the girl took the initiative to hug him. When Duque suddenly attacked, Aurelia had at least 81 ways to dodge Duque's claws. But Duque's unconscious murmur made Aurelia feel like she was struck by lightning. Aurelia! A soft call in a dream always had a special meaning at this time. Regardless of whether it was real or not, Duke had indeed called out to her in his dreams. Aurelia fell for it. The next moment, in front of the other 3 women, Duque hugged the female elf close to him and buried himself in the encirclement of the mountain of flesh demon king. The most dramatic thing was that because of the difficulty in breathing, Duque woke up. When most of Duque's vision was blocked by the mountain of flesh demon king, Duque opened his dog eyes and met Aurelia's emerald eyes. Chapter 353. There was a kind of awkwardness that was worse than death. There was another kind of awkwardness that was worse than death. Duque also wanted to confirm if there was a kind of love that was called letting go. Unfortunately, in this situation, it felt like he would die whether he let go or not. Since he was going to die anyway, Duque simply gave up on the treatment and let his face enjoy the shocking pressure of the mountain of flesh. At this moment, Aurelia's whole body was hot, and every inch of her exposed skin was dyed a beautiful red. It was very beautiful. The strange feeling of being stared at by 6 eyes almost made Aurelia go crazy. She had no idea how to deal with this situation. The more unexpected the situation, the easier it was for her to lose her mind. Aurelia made a very stupid decision. Cover up and not admit it. She glared fiercely at Duque and used her left hand to touch Duque's eyelids, trying to make Duque close his eyes. She also said, "Duque is really drunk and muddle-headed." Aurelia wanted to fool around, but the problem was that Duque's rumored sister-in-law did not agree. Cervantes also put his hands on his waist. "Sister, although I also want to protect your face, our family and friends are exposed to the orc's weapons. Sister, even if you are embarrassed, I still have to say, Duque is awake." Aurelia might be able to fool Vanessa and Elugia, but she could never fool her sister. The elves' long ears had a special ability called listen, which could hear sounds that were farther and had a wider frequency than humans. The change in Duque's breathing could not be hidden from Queen Sylvanas. In this emergency situation, Queen Sylvanas directly pierced through this piece of paper. At this moment, Aurelia wanted to die. At this moment, Duque's arms were still tightly wrapped around a certain elf's waist. She frowned and tried to make her face look fierce. "Duque, you still won't let go? You sisters promise not to hit me?" Duque continued to roll his eyes. His snorts echoed in the canyon between the deep Mount Hygel. Aurelia now treated Duque like a little ancestor. "For the sake of God, I can't wait to beg you. How would I dare to hit you?" 10 seconds later, the farce was over. Someone pretended to be fine. He seemed to be decisive, but in fact, he reluctantly let go of the Demon King Aurelia. Then, Duque asked the system elf to inform his body to filter his blood through the arcane circuit and let the Phoenix Flame circuit evaporate the alcohol in the blood. Then, he washed his face. Duque finally sat opposite the blushing Aurelia. On one side were the Windrunner sisters, and on the other side were Duque, Alicia and Vanessa, who stood at the back, with a dining table between them. With Cervantes' brief and concise explanation, Duque finally understood the current situation. "Duque, for my sake, send troops to save Cuel Salis, okay? Only your army can save my hometown." Duque crossed his fingers and pressed the back of his fingers against the tip of his nose. His gaze became deep again. He was recalling all the details of the second battle of the Dark Portal that he knew. Once he was a player who understood the story of a game. Right now, he was a transmigrator who had personally arrived to control the direction of this world-shaking battle. Everything could change, and every choice had the chance to have a far-reaching impact. At this point in World War II, Duque could almost say that even if he didn't do anything, the Alliance had a 70% chance of winning. The problem now was no longer limited to winning, but the situation and layout after the victory. Once they entered the third battle of the Dark Portal, it would be the day of the rise of the Lich King. The entire North and Lordaeron continent would be smashed into pieces by the brainless Arthas. How much vitality could be preserved was the key. However, when he thought of the Silvermoon Council, the Pig of the Pig teammates, Duque had the urge to quickly kill them all. The Silvermoon Council was arrogant, deceiving the people and the king. They were a cancer in the world of the High Elves. Other than fighting to the death in the last battle, the Silvermoon Council was definitely a useless trash-level existence. Yet, dealing with them in advance was tantamount to dividing the humans and the High Elves. Duque pondered for a while and finally sighed. Seamus is right. Before we get Kuel Salas's application to join the Alliance, and a letter asking for help, the Alliance can't send troops. As soon as Duque finished speaking, the Windrunner sisters, who were already tearing up, stood up. Aurelia bit her lip hard, and blood seeped out of the corner of her mouth. She slammed the table. Duque, I was wrong about you. 30,000 elven civilians will die because of the wrong choice made by the Silvermoon Council and you. Duque, I hate you. Aurelia was extremely agitated, her chest heaving up and down violently. Duque was not in the mood to appreciate this stunning scene. Duque was also angry. Then what about me? Being biased and bringing the elites that Stormwind relied on to restore the country, just because of your request, illegally crossed the border, rushed into a forbidden country, and fought with the tribe. Then the Sun King said, I didn't ask you to come into our country. As if we were just watching a dog fight. You dismissed us with just one sentence? What Duque said was absolutely the truth. The key to Kuel Salas's crisis was that the higher-ups of Silvermoon City were like **T. This was the arrogance of the High Elves that had been passed down for thousands of years. It had nothing to do with Duque or any other race in the world. Aurelia cried bitterly. She leaned on the table and wailed. The tears of a beauty always made people's hearts ache. Servanas clenched his fists and pursed his lips. He could not help but shout. Duque, my sister trusted you wrongly. Without the phoenix flame that she gave you, would you have the status you have today? Faced with Queen Sylvie's rebuke, Duque smiled sadly. Then I'll accompany you to the Longsong Forest as an individual. After I die in battle, I can return the favor to Aurelia, right? A cold wind blew through the room. For a moment, all the women in the room were stunned. Duque, the powerful Duque, who had the power to mobilize the troops of the 8 kingdoms, had a series of brilliant achievements, and carried the hopes of countless humans, actually had the courage to say such words. No one did not believe in Duque, because Duque's words were almost synonymous with fate. Suddenly, the door was knocked open. No, if you die in Kuel Salas, what about the millions of soldiers and civilians in Stormwind who are waiting to restore the country? General Seamus roared. What about the private soldiers who trust you and are loyal to you? What about your followers? You don't even have an heir. Windsor also roared. The Windrunner sisters were dumbfounded. Chapter 354. It was as if they had sunk into an endless cycle. Aurelia could not stop the Sun King and the Silvermoon Council from courting death. The Alliance could not help even if they wanted to, because the elven higher-ups were blocking them. Similarly, no matter how good Duque was at fighting, he could not single-handedly take care of more than 50,000 elite orcs. Moreover, Aurelia discovered something else. It seemed like the strongest warlock of the tribe, Gul'dan, had brought his trusted aides to catch up to Orgrim's troops on a red dragon. Gul'dan was a powerful mage who could suppress the strongest human wizard Antonidas. Sending a Morning Star wizard like Duque would just be sending himself to his death. Even if Duque wanted to go, he would be completely opposed by the generals of the Stormwind faction. At this moment, Aurelia sank into despair. Sister, let's go. Since the humans are not willing to help, we have to go back ourselves. Sylvanas said with determination as she pulled on her sister's hand. Illyria, on the other hand, gave Duke one last pleading look. Duque took a deep breath. Actually, there's one last way. Once Duque said this, the entire place went silent. Every pair of eyes stared at Duque, and every heart stopped beating. Everyone held their breath. Speak. Aurelia was instinctively excited. Aurelia Windrunner, are you willing to be a patriotic traitor? Patriotic traitor? Be it Aurelia or the others, they were all confused by Duque's words. Duque said in a low voice. Even if it's a lord, inviting foreign troops into his own country is a crime of treason. But you, Aurelia, you can be a traitor because of your patriotism, because you want to save the High Elves. Of course there's a price to pay. What price? Aurelia's eyes brightened. I can take on the identity of a wandering duke, and bring all my private soldiers to be hired by you, Aurelia Windrunner. The problem was that everyone knew I wasn't short of money. Therefore the price is, after this battle, you must take at least 1,000 of the Windrunner family's elites, give up Kuel Salas's position, and become my vassal Duke Marcus's vassal. As soon as Duque's voice fell, everyone was stunned. In the next moment, everyone began to ponder. It seemed like it was indeed feasible. First of all, Duque was not a king. His status wasn't so high that he couldn't be fooled no matter what. It wasn't wrong to say that Duque was a wandering duke. Stormwind had been destroyed. A country without territory would not be recognized. Didn't you see that after Duke Fairville left Kul Tiras, he was just a pirate leader? Who would really recognize him as a duke? Secondly, even with his so-called private army, the strength of Duque's subordinates was quite shocking. Apart from the basic 10,000 private soldiers, Duque also had a group of mages. Moreover, it would be difficult to fool them. Finally, there was the price. From a legal point of view, even if Kuel Salas joined the alliance, someone had to take the blame for this kind of thing. Everyone knew about the ambiguous relationship between Duque and Aurelia. The problem was that if Duque really wanted to marry Aurelia, it would be super troublesome. The union of a duke from another country, and General Kuel Salas, must be approved by the Sun King and the Silver Moon Council. When that time came, it was really unknown what kind of trouble Duque and the Windrunner family would be in. Duque took this opportunity to pull Aurelia out of it, killing two birds with one stone. Moreover, there were 1,000 of the strongest elven rangers on the continent. It was precisely because of these conditions that Duque's deal would not seem to be a loss in the eyes of all the nobles. Otherwise, the nobles would only think that Duque was an idiot. If the Sun King really wanted to pursue the matter, no one except Stormwind would protect Duque. At this time, Aurelia fell into infinite entanglement. A patriotic traitor in exchange for the survival of tens of thousands of his compatriots. Aurelia's conscience and affection for Duque instantly prevailed in both rational and emotional aspects at the same time. Duque, I can personally promise you, but I can't give a definite answer on behalf of the rangers of the Windrunner family. No, 1,000 rangers, not one less. This is a matter of attitude. Unexpectedly, it was Alicia who bargained for Duque. Duque was stunned. What surprised Duque even more was yet to come. I know my brothers and sisters. There can't be 1,000 rangers of the Windrunner family who are willing to give up their homeland. 300 is already the limit, Servanas interrupted. Alicia was anxious. We can't accept such conditions. Of course it's not fair. However, as long as you can cover the evacuation of more than 20,000 civilians in Longsong Forest to Silvery Moon City, Duque, I'm willing to give up my position in Kuel Salas and become your vassal together with my sister. Duque's brain went blank for a second. Surprise! This was definitely an unexpected surprise. Duque had never thought that he could gain so much from attacking Kuel Salas with the help of the tribe. That was Aurelia and Sylvanas, the eldest and second children of the Windrunner family, the two strongest rangers in the world. In terms of strength, even the third sister, Sasha, was still a distance away from them. Not to mention, in the original history, one was a great hero in Stormwind City's King's Valley, and the other was a queen who could summon wind and rain in the tribe, and even become the chief of the tribe in the distant future. Damn it, this was really a big win. If there weren't so many people watching, Duque really wanted to immediately shout, I've tricked Aurelia and Queen Sylvanas into my hands. At this moment, Duque finally felt a sense of pride for completely changing history. No matter what, as long as he passed Kuel Salas this time, then there wouldn't be another Sylvanas, who died in Silvery Moon City, and there wouldn't be another forgotten queen in the future. The forgotten ones? Bah, I'm a living person. I don't care how those bones die. Alicia originally wanted to fight for more benefits for Duque, but seeing Duque's excited eyes, she quietly retreated to the side of Duque's body. Similarly, Seamus and Windsor didn't want their boss to go so far away to be a mercenary. After seeing the look in Duque's eyes, they all sighed deeply. All right, I hope that helping the elves this time won't be too bad. With a plan, everything would be easy to handle. When Duque woke up King Lang overnight with a magic message and explained the seriousness of the matter, Lang gave Duque and Aurelia a surprise. If some of the Griffin Legion soldiers are willing to become your private soldiers, I can't stop them. Sometimes, nobles like to secretly increase the number of their private soldiers, but the king can't find out, so it's not against the rules. However, in the future, there will be many elites from the Griffin Legion on the battlefield. Chapter 355. A king's speech was often a form of art. Some words could not be said directly. In any case, Duque, Aurelia, and Seamus understood. Seeing Seamus silently request the dwarves to forge 20,000 Duque private soldier badges, Aurelia held Duque's hand at some point. She knew very well that Duque had used his connections to the extreme. Everyone knew that in all of Stormwind, apart from the Royal Knights under Lothar's direct command, Seamus' Griffin Legion was the best fighter. The former could fight, but there were too few of them. The latter was the true main force of Stormwind. After repeated expansions, the Griffin Legion had expanded to a huge army of 20,000. The core was still the Griffin Legion that had retreated from the Redridge Mountains to Stormwind City. These warriors who had gone through many battles were the foundation of Stormwind Kingdom's revival, the cream of the army. Now, with a single request from Duque, Lang allowed him to get them to pretend to be private soldiers. Moreover, 30,000 soldiers was the limit of a Grand Duke's strength. Not breaking the rules was better than breaking the rules. Perhaps it could be explained as a strategic need, but no one could ignore the huge risks they had to bear, as well as the almost unbearable camaraderie. It was impossible for a friend to gamble the future of a kingdom with millions of people to save tens of thousands of his own people. Loyalty and camaraderie had always been difficult. According to Duque, accompanying her to death was already doing his part as a friend. Pulling 30,000 elites could only mean one thing. She, Aurelia, had long surpassed the definition of a friend in Duque's heart. At some point, only Aurelia and Duque were left in the room. Suddenly realizing that her hand was still on the back of Duque's left hand, Aurelia felt awkward and didn't know if she should pull her hand back. After hesitating for 2 seconds, Aurelia still pulled her hand back. Who knew that at this moment, Duque would grab her hand? In terms of reaction time, Aurelia was 9 blocks ahead of Duque. If a high-level ranger didn't want to be caught by a mage in close combat, there were at least 3 ways to do so. Aurelia's hand was grabbed, which only proved one thing. She didn't want to hurt Duque's heart. The former great demon king was now like a frightened little rabbit. Duque grabbed her hand with his left hand and put his right hand around Aurelia's waist. Sometimes people were like this. After the first time, it was easy to have a second time. After being hugged by the drunk Duque, Aurelia, who hesitated again, lost the chance to resist. Aurelia's waist was very soft and had the flexibility of a well-trained person. In terms of touch, it could really compete with Savannah's. Maybe it was because Aurelia's figure was a little more plump, so it felt better to hug her. It was a kind of comfortable feeling that even though she was healthy and beautiful, he still felt like his hands would melt if he hugged her. She realized that Duque was probably going to make things clear. Aurelia quickly took 2 deep breaths. Sorry, I'm not ready yet. If a high elf wants to mate with a human, it means that she has to be prepared to face endless loneliness after 100 years. I'm not ready yet. Hearing this, Duque couldn't help but laugh. He had taken it for granted. The high elves boasted of eternal life, but in reality it wasn't. 10,000 years before the war between humans and orcs broke out, there was only one huge land in the world of Azeroth surrounded by endless oceans, Kalimdor. Many different races and creatures lived on this land, fighting against the harsh natural environment. In the center of this dark land was a lake full of mysterious energy. This lake was called the Well of Eternity, and it was the source of magic and natural energy of the entire world. While absorbing energy from the endless darkness outside this world, the Well of Eternity continuously released energy to the entire world, providing nutrition for all kinds of creatures in the world. This attracted the attention of the demon king Sargeras. This was the invasion of the Burning Legion 10,000 years ago. Later on, due to the aftermath of the war, a series of magic reactions interfered with the energy of the well, causing a huge explosion. This led to what later generations would call the Cataclysm. The entire Kalimdor continent was split into several parts, mainly the Kalimdor continent in the west, the Eastern Kingdom in the east, Northrend in the north, and Pandaria in the south. The location where the well water was originally located collapsed into a never-ending whirlpool. This tragic war was called the War of the Ancients. Because of Illidan's selfishness, he left behind a small bottle of well water from the Well of Eternity, and once again artificially created a Well of Eternity. As long as the Well of Eternity existed, the Burning Legion would not give up the idea of conquering this world. In order to protect the Well of Eternity, the three Dragon Kings, the Red Dragon, the Green Dragon, and the Bronze Dragon joined forces to bless the Well of Eternity. The Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza planted a huge oak tree that could heal the scars of the earth, which later became the World Tree Nordrassil. The King of Time, the Bronze Dragon King Nozdormu, added magic to the World Tree. As long as the World Tree existed, the Night Elves would never age or get sick. This was the source of the elves' immortality. In fact, after being exiled by the Night Elves, the High Elves lost the power of immortality. However, for humans, the lifespan of the elves was still extremely long. Duque understood Aurelia's concerns, but he couldn't tell Aurelia that the legend of the elves' immortality would be mercilessly broken in the near future. Of course, he had another way to comfort Aurelia and break down her defenses. Duque took out his bird's head. Don't get the wrong idea. If you get the wrong idea, face the wall. This was just the head of the artifact magic staff, a tiche, which happened to be in the shape of a wooden bird's head. This is a tiche's? Feeling the powerful magic waves on it, Aurelia could totally imagine how shocking the power of this magic staff would be when it was complete. The previous guardian, Aegwin, seems to be more than 800 years old. Duque seemed to be saying something irrelevant, but he was actually reminding Aurelia that he, who had obtained the inheritance of Medivh, actually had other ways to obtain immortality. Aurelia's face instantly turned red. If it was said that she was unwilling to break down her defenses before because of her lifespan, then now, under the premise that both of them had almost endless lifespans, all the obstacles that she had set up were not valid. Aurelia was completely confused. Facing Duque's gradually approaching face, she was completely at a loss. Duque gave her a light kiss on her smooth forehead. Gazing at Aurelia's emerald eyes, Duque smiled suavely. I know you are thinking about your brethren, and have no time to be distracted. But after that, Aurelia ran away, as if she was flying. Chapter 356. The warmth was short-lived. If the elven inhabitants of Kuel Salis Longsong Forest died tragically because of personal matters, the warmth tonight would become a scar in the future. In fact, less than 5 minutes after Aurelia ran away, she turned back, slightly lowered her head, shoulders slumped and clenched her fists. I know it's too much, but the horde is heading towards Kuel Salis. They've already left us behind. We've already lost a few days. If we don't gather the troops as soon as possible, we'll only be left further behind. Duque naturally grabbed Aurelia's arms with both of his hands. It's a taboo for the army to suddenly wake up and march in the middle of the night. We humans don't have the elven's night vision. Just marching alone will cause a lot of problems. I also have to guard against the horde army that stayed behind to ambush us. Ambush? Yes, ambush. I have to say, Orgrim did a good job. He knew that we would come here to help the Wildhammer dwarves. So he led the main force to the north, leaving behind some to slow us down. For example, the orcs that feigned an attack during the day, or the one hiding in the depths of the hinterlands forest. There's more. Aurelia's eyes widened. She suddenly felt a chill down her spine. If Duque really let the army march through the night under her request, then they would undoubtedly be ambushed by the horde hidden in the forest. In the dark, the performance of the human army was very poor, as long as they chose the right place to ambush. Even if they couldn't defeat the humans immediately, they could drag the battle into a chaotic battle that the orcs were best at. In a chaotic battle, the orcs' individual combat power would increase exponentially. They could even rely on the chaotic battle to defeat the human reinforcements. At that time, Quell the Lost would truly be isolated and helpless. At this moment, Aurelia realized the difference between her and Duque. She might be a competent battlefield commander, but she wasn't good at strategy. In front of commanders like Duke and Orgrim, she wasn't even worth looking at. In fact, Aurelia could not imagine how difficult the task of the reinforcements was, chasing after an elite army, moving with all their might, and defending against possible ambushes. She only hoped that they could arrive at the Long Song Forest in time. Then what should we do? The main force of the beastmen is so far away from us. Every second we delay will allow the tribe to get closer to Quell Salis. Even if she didn't want to admit it, Duque was the only one who could give her advice at this time. Nothing much. You came all the way from Quell Salis, so you must be very tired. I suggest that you have a good sleep first, then. When Duque saw the stubborn look in Aurelia's eyes, he smiled bitterly. Well, if I don't solve the mystery, you won't rest, right? Aurelia's bright eyes stared at Duque, as if saying, you already know the answer. Duque shrugged. This isn't a fair competition in the arena. If Orgrim can send his army to harass us, why can't I send people to stop them? Don't forget who predicted that the horde would march this way. Well, the hint is FFF. FFF was naturally Duque's flamethrower army. It was now the middle of summer in May, so it wasn't too difficult to set fire to the forest. Even though Aurelia hated burning the forest as an elf, they were facing a great enemy. And she wasn't a druid who believed in nature. It didn't matter if it was a black or white cat. As long as it could catch mice, it was a good cat. Because of the battle in the Silverpine Forest, Lordaeron had used up almost all of their forces in the rear. It was not realistic for Lordaeron to send troops to stop Orgrim's elite army. There was no other way to delay the horde's army with a small number of troops. Aurelia came to a sudden realization, and her expression suddenly became very interesting. Bastard, you already planned everything, and then forced me to betray my country and become your vassal? Completely disregarding everything, Aurelia pounced on Duque, opened her white teeth, and bit down hard on his left shoulder. Ah, it hurts. Are you a puppy? It wasn't a joke. Aurelia's bite was really painful. It was as if her entire flesh was about to be torn off. Duque's tears flowed out. Aurelia's teeth were very good, but she didn't bite down anymore. Duque felt something wet on his shoulder. Aurelia was crying. Turning his head, Duque saw crystal-clear tears rolling down Aurelia's beautiful face. Duque was speechless for a moment. I know, you didn't do this on purpose. If it wasn't for Anastrian and those bastards from the Silver Moon Council, you wouldn't have to be so uncomfortable. I just feel very tired. If I knew that a tragedy would happen but couldn't stop it, I would really collapse. I'm so tired, let me rest for a while. But I warn you, don't attack me. Otherwise I will hate you. As she spoke, Aurelia hugged Duque and let out a sweet sound. Gently stroking Aurelia's long golden hair, Duque revealed a faint smile. You've worked hard, sleep well. Aurelia was indeed very tired. After Duque informed Quell Salis of the danger, because there were still a small number of tribal warships on the sea route, it was not safe. She first took a team of nearly 1,000 rangers and marched nearly 1,000 kilometers back to quell the loss. After warning her motherland and realizing that it was useless, then he rushed to the Long Song Forest and mobilized the people to prepare for evacuation. After realizing that the warning to her motherland was useless, she desperately rushed to the hinterlands to seek help from Duque. Ever since Duque arrived at the Earthy Highlands, Aurelia had not had a good rest. Now that she was finally relaxed, She naturally slept like a log. Duque carried her, gently put her on his bed, covered her with the quilt, and walked out of the door. As soon as he walked out of the door, Duque immediately sensed multiple gazes on his face. Humph. If you dare to take advantage of this time, I will definitely kill you. Queen Sylvanas left a harsh remark, and then left. Duke didn't reply. He stared blankly for 2 seconds as Queen Sylvie turned around and left. Then he rubbed his nose. I knew you were eavesdropping. Who the hell would touch Illyria at this time? Duque looked at Vanessa. The disobedient little maid suddenly muttered to herself. Sigh, I'm really a busy maid. I'm just a maid, but I have to follow her to the battlefield. I don't know if my black-hearted master will occasionally be kind enough to give me a raise. Pfft. No matter how many times he saw Vanessa, Duque felt a little funny. This girl seemed to dislike him no matter what, but she would always help him with the housework. Well, your master is rich. In the future, your salary will be doubled. That's more like it. I can go change to a dagger. Is there a maid like you? Chapter 357. Duque. Master, I have to go prepare as well. Alicia also stood up and bowed. Actually, it's going to be a rapid march. If you think it's too tiring, you don't have to go. Duque advised. No, it's better to serve the Alliance than to stay in a safe place and deal with those insincere courtship. Alicia smiled sweetly. Looking at Alicia's gentle and sweet smile, Duque felt that. It seemed like forget it. Duque rubbed the back of his head, then rolled to the next room to catch up on his sleep. 8 o'clock in the morning. Whether they were willing or not, the leaders of the Alliance in the Eagle's Nest Mountain were all awake. Looking at Aurelia, who appeared beside Duque, and listening to the explanation of the military situation, Kudrin Wildhammer frowned. Even if we know that this is a feint, as long as the Horde army in the Hinterlands forest is not destroyed, the Wildhammer dwarves' homeland will still be threatened. This is not just a feint. I'm afraid that before ensuring the safety of the Eagle's Nest Mountain, the Wildhammer dwarves will not be able to provide any more assistance. Duque pointed at the map. The trolls have been here for thousands of years, and no one has been able to truly destroy them. So it's unrealistic to clear the hinterlands of the Horde and the trolls. What are you going to do? Kudrin stroked his big orange-red beard. We can't let this unknown force follow behind our main force or arrive before us. I'll let General Seamus stay in the hinterlands with 20,000 elites to ensure that this forest is completely cleared. Then we'll create a treeless isolation zone that is at least 2 kilometers wide and build a series of sentry towers to ensure that every troll or orc passing by will be discovered. Looking at the straight line that Duque drew between the Troll's Nest and the Eagle's Nest Mountain, Kudrin was deep in thought. How? Or set a fire? Aren't you afraid of burning the entire hinterlands? Believe me, I'm a professional. I've done it before in the Elven Forest. Kudrin was quite speechless and nodded. Well, there are no druids among the dwarves. Duque continued. Then when you're free, I hope you can build a fortress here within a month. Duque was referring to the location of the Northern Sentinel Tower in the Eastern Plaguelands. It was just the right place to block the way from the elves' Longsong Forest to the holy city of Stratholme. A month? Kudrin was surprised. We've done this before in Stormwind City, General Tom explained. This is a new material called cement. Of course, with enough cement, I can build a wall from Stratholme to Lordaeron in a month. I've already had Makarov prepare the cement in Stratholme. Then I have no problem. Tom nodded. Now that the situation was settled, Kudrin's brows relaxed. Thank you for your assistance, he said respectfully. When the hinterlands is safe again, my Griffin Knights and I will catch up with you and go to the north to deal with the remaining tribes. Thank you, King of the Barbarians. Duque bowed and turned to the others. All right, ladies and gentlemen, don't just stand there. Let's get to Kuel Salis in 10 days. 3 days later, Orgrim almost went mad with anger. This should have been a seamless transition. The humans would have panicked and thought that they would lead their army to break through the poison fog canyon to the west to attack Alterac. They would have feared that they would attack Andoral to the northwest to attack Lordaeron. They would even think that they were going to attack the weakly defended Stratholme. Obviously, the humans had predicted their path. It was unknown whether or not Duke Marcus, who should have been killed 10,000 times, had anticipated this, but their path forward was blocked. If it was a human army of 100,000, Orgrim wouldn't be afraid. Unfortunately, it wasn't. A crimson light was reflected in the eyes of the orcs. They were no strangers to this kind of light, because they had seen it at almost the same time last year, when the orcs were determined to take down Stormwind City. There was one in the north, and another in the northwest, and a third in the northeast. The fourth red light in the west was getting brighter and brighter. Along with the red light, a huge pillar of black smoke pierced through the clouds. There were at least 4 fires, and it was obviously arson. The forest fire was so fierce that it seemed to light up the entire cloud layer, turning the clouds into rolling and burning clouds. When it was obvious that they lacked manpower, the humans directly set fire to the forest to stop the horde's advance. Not all orcs came from the Blackrock tribe that was born with high fire resistance. Similarly, even if the trolls had good self-healing abilities, they couldn't just pass through the burning forest. It was either turn around, or wait for the forest fire to die out. Since the humans were already prepared, it was probably useless to turn around. Orgrim gritted his teeth and ordered, "Let's wait near Lake Meridal." The orcs originally won with time, but the humans were stalling for time. There weren't many humans here, but this was human territory after all. Orgrim originally wanted to use the large forest as cover to quickly pass through this area and enter Cuel Salis. Now it seemed that this idea had been foiled. Opening the map, for a moment, Orgrim thought of not fighting the High Elves and directly attacking the major human cities, such as Stratholme or Lordaeron. But he immediately realized that Zujin was staring at him to see if he would fulfill his promise. The relationship between the orcs and trolls was still very weak. Orgrim knew very well that trolls had the qualities that the orcs needed. The orcs' talent determined that they were best suited to be warriors, and a few could be shamans or warlocks. The orcs lacked talent in long-range attacks. The presence of the trolls made up for this. Orgrim changed his mind. "Zujin, I heard that the elves are the enemies of all trolls." "You are right, Great Chief. The trolls here in Zul Mashar seem to be some Moss clan." "The Moss clan," Zujin corrected Orgrim. "All right, since our troops can't advance for now, I'll give you a mission. Contact the Moss clan and ask them to attack Eversong Forest together?" Orgrim's reddish-brown face had a sinister smile. "Since we can't ambush them, let's attack openly. I want you and your people to contact all the trolls nearby. Let's play big." Chapter 358. The night was peaceful, peaceful, and peaceful. The forest that had been burnt to a crisp was as silent as a graveyard that could bury everything. As the last spark in the forest died out, the heat between heaven and earth finally came to an end. A group of human sentries were stationed at the intersection of the Bluestone Path, between 2 huge forests. They had a standard security system, with enough fire to expand their field of vision, as well as sentries that were either out in the open or in the dark. However, outside the shadow of the bonfire, a huge but completely silent shadow had snuck into their security perimeter. They slowed down and cautiously took each step on the charred, carbonized ground. Their hands gripped tightly onto various weapons to avoid making any clashing sounds as they moved. It was obvious that their worries were unnecessary. Humans were far less sensitive than their long-eared allies, the elves. The land was pitch black, with only the occasional ray of moonlight shining through the gaps between the thick clouds. The moonlight shone on the ground, creating a strange scene. Darkness was fatal to humans, but it was nothing to the trolls. After years of traversing the forest, the trolls had the innate ability night vision. No, it should be said that the Dark Elves, who were a mutated branch of the Dark Trolls 14,000 years ago, had inherited their innate ability from the trolls. At that moment, the trolls' pupils dilated, sweeping away the darkness. Every detail of the burnt forest could be seen clearly. The trolls were furious at the humans who destroyed the forest. Therefore, when they attacked, they threw out spears that were filled with rage. Almost in an instant, a team of 12 people completely disappeared from this world. 3 days later, with the help of the fire blocking the horde's path, Duque's reinforcements had closed the distance between them and the horde to 120 kilometers. This was already a very sensitive distance. If they marched without any regard for their lives, they could reach the horde in half a day. But at that moment, Duque had lost track of the horde's army. It wasn't that Orgrim's army had disappeared, but all the scouts that Duque had sent out from Stratholm were killed. Not only did they kill the scouts, but even the 5 FFF flamethrower squads that Duque had sent out were wiped out. Duque's face was livid. What made Duque and Aurelia waver was yet to come. Knowing that his army's movements had been exposed, Orgrim decided to use a beautiful method of suppressing the enemy with information. He didn't just send out Zujin's troll army to hunt down human and elven scouts. He also ordered Zulahid's dragoons to attack all the human settlements in the area. After all, this area was far from the complete destruction of the Eastern Plague Lands in the future. Not only was it barren, but it was also filled with plagues and death. As the rear of the Rotterdam Kingdom, it was still an important source of food. With most of their forces deployed to defend the borders of the Silverpine Forest, the Stratholm region, which was supposed to be the rear, was really empty. Many towns couldn't even gather a squadron of archers. Not to mention the red dragon that could fly around in the sky and spit fire. All of a sudden, the cities were in danger. The nobles of Maris Farm, Darrowshire, Stratholm, and other places all asked for help from Rotterdam. King Tyrrhenas, who was under great pressure, immediately threw stacks of letters to Duque. It made Duque want to die when he saw the magic letters. Orgrim is going to attack Stratholm? Windsor asked. No, this is just a smokescreen. Duque was very sure. If Orgrim dares to attack any human city before attacking Kuel Salis, I bet that the troll leader Zujin will definitely leave with his people. The problem is, no king in the Alliance knows the trolls like you do, and even knows who their leader is. Or, they know that you are right, but because of the pressure from below, they have no choice but to put pressure on you. Duque couldn't help but smile bitterly. Reggie, now you know that it's not easy to be the vice commander of the Alliance, right? Windsor nodded. I have to admit, Orgrim did a great job this time. Now the arrogant Silvermoon Council believes that the Horde is going to take care of Rotterdam. And Rotterdam can't wait for the Horde to leave. It doesn't matter if we fight the elves or jump into the sea, as long as we don't wander around their land. So we can only rely on the two ladies, Windrunner. Yes, let's set up camp. Since they had fewer soldiers than the Horde, Duque didn't dare to advance recklessly. He could play with the elves and attack the Horde from the front and back. Once they were ambushed, it would only be a matter of minutes before they were destroyed. He couldn't afford to gamble. On the other side, in the name of the Silvermoon, where are they? Aurelia held a long, thin sword in her hand as she ran in the forest. The leaves and branches made her look a little blurry. The few rangers had fanned out in all directions to expand their scouting range. However, when Aurelia found out that the trolls were their enemies, she hoped that they wouldn't break into the trolls' encirclement. She hoped that she or Servanas would find these evil green-skinned creatures first. Aurelia was confused again. Her logic and emotions told her that Duque's deduction was correct. In fact, it was because Aurelia obeyed and followed his arrangements that she would cross the mountains to search for the Horde. On the other hand, she couldn't help but think that if she hadn't come to Longsong Forest for help, she would have been able to face the invaders with her family and her compatriots and fight against the evil together with the orcs and trolls. It was a very contradictory feeling. She knew that Duque wanted her to separate from Kuel Salis for some special reason, but she couldn't give up her country and people. After all, this was the land she had lived and fought for thousands of years. Aurelia was very conflicted. At this moment, she suddenly heard a whistle in the wind. It was her sister calling her. Aurelia quickly rushed over. It was a fork in the forest. This was not a traditional path for people to walk, it was more like a path for animals. However, this path had a special meaning for the trolls. The trolls liked to use this kind of fork to announce important things. For example, this was a withered troll corpse hanging at a fork in the road. The color of the corpse's fur was still shiny, and all the feathers and tooth ornaments on the body were very new. But this troll seemed to have all the flesh and blood in its body. This is the former leader of a troll clan. He failed in some kind of leadership election ceremony and was directly sacrificed to an evil god. Then, I found that the entire clan migrated north. Chapter 359. Listening to the Windrunner sisters' report, Duque looked at the military map and rubbed his chin in thought. All the way to the north. Orgrim is amazing, Windsor, who had also seen through Orgrim's plan, sighed. Since we know the Horde's target is Kuel Salis, we should hurry and get ahead of the Horde. Servanas slammed the table. As soon as she finished speaking, she realized that everyone else had an expression that said, "You're right, but it's meaningless." Aurelia shook her head. That's why Orgrim is so smart. If we can't figure out where the Horde's main force is, we might be ambushed while we're marching. The Horde's army is far stronger than ours. If we're ambushed, everything will be over. We can expand our scouting range, Queen Servanas suggested, unwilling to give up. Aurelia still shook her head. There's no point in just warning us. With our current strength, if we fight the Horde in the wild, we'll lose. No one knew how many trolls had joined the Horde. The latest information was that at least 3 trolls had joined the Horde. The number of trolls in each clan had always been a mystery. The worst-case scenario was that Duque's 30,000 people ran into 100,000 Horde army. No matter how brave these people were, they would just be cannon fodder. This was not a joke, because the strongest heroes of the Horde were among them. Orgrim, Gul'dan, Guggle Zuluhid, Talon Gorfiend. It didn't matter if Gul'dan tried his best. Even if Gul'dan used 20% of his power, Duque would definitely die, and there was a high chance that he would not be able to revive. After all, Gul'dan was an expert at using forbidden death magic. Duque did not want to be captured and turned into a ghoul or a frost lich when he finally succeeded in seducing Aurelia. Then I'll call the Windrunner's rangers back? Servanas said unwillingly. Duke continued to shake his head. Let's not talk about the chances of you winning against the trolls, who are also adept in jungle warfare. Just the loss of stamina and energy from this round is enough to put you at an absolute disadvantage. Even if you kill all the elites of your family, you won't know where the main force of the tribe is. Windsor gritted his teeth. If only Wildhammer's air force had arrived earlier. We can at least fight against the wyverns of the Horde. Duque nodded. I have already sent a message to Kudrin. He promised to send us a squadron of griffins in 3 days. Phew, that's the only good news. However, our intelligence blockade has yet to be lifted. My people have noticed more and more troll hunters around the camp. Windsor brought up another matter. Duque muttered to himself. Now whether it was entering or staying, they would have to take a huge risk. If this army of 30,000 remained motionless for too long, they might attract Orgrim's attention. It wasn't impossible for him to launch a sudden counterattack. All motives still depended on the changes in the situation. Once he was close enough to the main force of the Horde, Orgrim would definitely not mind eating this human's tail. Let's retreat to the foot of the mountain near the hinterlands first. As for the warning, I can solve it the day after tomorrow at the latest. Aurelia's bright eyes widened. How? Dear Miss Aurelia Windrunner, are you interested in accompanying me on a trip to Dan Morrow? Huh. What the hell? A trip to Dan Morrow? Dan Morrow was the region where the dwarves' iron furnace castle was located. The dwarves there were defending their main city to the death. It could be said that the entire Dan Morrow was a tribe. Why did Duque suddenly want to travel to Dan Morrow? Just as Aurelia was about to open her mouth and say something, Duque suddenly placed a finger on her red lips. The finger sank into her delicate red lips. It felt pretty good. Don't ask. Just trust me and follow me. I promise I won't let you down, Windrunner. Some things were just like that. In the past, Aurelia would definitely give Duque a hard knock on the back of his head. But now Aurelia often chose to believe in Duque. However, Queen Sylvanas was unhappy. She put her hands on her hips and interrogated Duque. Hey, don't forget, there's still a windrunner here. Why do you have to bring me along? Duque smirked. There has to be a windrunner in charge of scouting the camp. Sylvanas was infuriated. Duque was obviously abusing his position for personal gain. Unfortunately, she also knew that if she were to go, she would definitely not be so cooperative with Duque. You better remember this. Humph. Sylvanas turned her head and left. I'm going on patrol. Duque did not open a portal this time. It was not a good place to open a portal. This was because the place Duque wanted to go to did not have a fixed coordinate. This required Duque to use his brain and the system to lock onto the spatial location. What everyone did not expect was that Duque waved his hand and asked Vanessa to come over. Me. Vanessa was a little stunned. I need a skilled and trustworthy rogue. Upon hearing the word trustworthy, Vanessa, who still had the temperament of a little girl, immediately ran over to Duque. Then, Vanessa regretted it a little, because Duque had suddenly put his claws on her waist. In fact, Duque was hugging one on each side. On the left was Vanessa, and on the right was Aurelia. Without giving them too much time to struggle shyly, Duque directly opened the portal. The dazzling bluish-purple arcane light turned into dozens of mysterious rune ribbons in the air, and began to spin. As a large amount of arcane energy overflowed, the two girls suddenly felt that their surroundings were a little blurry and unreal. A small hole was torn in space, and instantly, an unstoppable force sucked them in. Aha! Aurelia, who was experienced and knowledgeable, was slightly better. Little Vanessa was so scared that she hugged Duque tightly. Only then did Duque realize that Vanessa had already developed so well. Without saying anything, he directly injected the moral integrity of a Mediv into himself. At the very least, he would not make a fool of himself. This was not a traditional teleportation. The teleportation between the main cities of the major kingdoms had relatively fixed spatial coordinates and a stable spatial structure. This was a teleportation that temporarily locked onto a target, so it was more laborious. Duque quickly found the bronze-bearded dwarven kingdom's Iron Stove Castle, and then quickly searched for his target. Fortunately, that thing was also very big, and Duque did not have to spend a lot of energy to find it. It was Gnomerigan, a level 35 dungeon in the game in his previous life. Now, it was the former hometown of the gnomes that they were forced to abandon. Once upon a time, the dwarves of Iron Stove Castle and the gnomes of Gnomerigan had a good relationship, but they did not live under the same roof. Because some gnome dared to die, his hometown collapsed. All kinds of monsters ran out and killed all the surviving gnomes. Most of the remaining gnomes turned into leper gnomes. Well, it was right to think of them as a kind of neurotic gnome. Looking at the unfamiliar scene in front of her, Aurelia was a little confused. What are we doing here? We are looking for the Yao Yao spirit. Huh? Chapter 360. A demon spirit? What kind of monster was that? Even though she was vomiting, Vanessa still stood up shakily. She pulled out her dagger and looked around cautiously. Duque gently stroked Vanessa's head. A demon spirit is a godly creature. It is harmless to humans and animals, but it can also be extremely troublesome. Many question marks popped up on Vanessa's head. Even though she had experienced more than one teleportation, Aurelia still could not get used to the jolting feeling that felt like all your internal organs were shaken out, stirred, and then stuffed back into your body. After a while, they finally had the mood to look at this strange underground city. Gnomerigan was built 172 years ago. This technological miracle city in Danmoro had been the main city of the gnomes for generations. 2 years ago, it was clear that there was another distortion in time and space, corresponding to the incorrect 21%. The major event that should have happened 20 years after the dark portal happened 2 years earlier. A group of evil rockjaws, or perhaps it should be said that the cave dwellers invaded many parts of Danmoro, including the main city of the gnomes. In order to kill these intruders, which were much larger and stronger than the gnomes, the great craftsman Mechatork ordered the city's emergency radiation tank to be opened. The gnomes were waiting for the rockjaws to die or escape, while also looking for a way to avoid the radiation. Unfortunately, although the rockjaws were infected by the radiation, their attacks did not stop, nor did they weaken. The gnomes that were not killed by the radiation were forced to flee. They found shelter in the nearby dwarven city of Ironstove Castle. The great craftsman Mechatork formed a think tank to discuss a plan to recapture their beloved city. Of course, before the gnomes succeeded, this place was a typical lawless place. In fact, before Duque transmigrated, he still remembered that the gnomes did not succeed in their battle. It could not be said that there was no progress. It was just the so-called progress of recapturing one of the main gates. What entered Duque and the other two's eyes was an extremely steampunk-style city. There were huge metal objects everywhere. Long and heavy cantilevers, steam or unknown gas spewing everywhere, and shining lights. Although Duque really wanted to give the gnome a high-tech name. But he didn't want to. However, Duque, who came from a more modern and more technologically advanced society, couldn't give a higher evaluation of the huge iron sheet walls and the mechanical devices that could only be fixed with ugly willows. Of course, to the world of Azeroth, everything here was undoubtedly black technology. Yep, in this world, other than the true black technology left behind by the creation titans, the races with the most high-tech elements would undoubtedly be the goblins, who had the spirit of courting death, and would easily explode no matter what they did, and the dwarves, who were crazy and prone to making mistakes. Just like how the earliest steam engine might not be as powerful as a horse, the current gnome technology was a little similar. Even if a certain creation had epic-making significance from head to toe, it was very likely that it would not be able to defeat a violent demolition unit. Now the elf ranger general, who advocated nature, was unhappy. He felt that the current Aurelia wanted to give everything she saw a steady shot. Duque rubbed his eyebrows and directly opened the ice barrier. The fierce cold wind circled clockwise in the form of a tornado, surrounding Duque and the two girls. This is... Vanessa looked at the massive ice barrier, which had a diameter of 20 meters. As Duque moved forward, she was so surprised that she could not speak. She had always known that Duque was powerful, but she did not expect that Duque could use this barrier to drive away the purple dust floating in the air. Time was running out, so Duque did not explain too much. He then led the two women into the depths of Gnomerigan. Aurelia was surprised, because it seemed that no one had been here for a long time. Duque was obviously very familiar with this place. Have you been here before? No, but I've read about this place in detail in the books. Duque said something that even he himself did not believe. It was exactly the time when he took his brothers to play dungeons, until he threw up. There were subterranean dwellers that were only half the height of a human, or leprosy gnomes that were even shorter, and had disgusting blisters all over their bodies. But Duque easily took care of them with Hand of Magic's Ice Spear spell. Duque was completely indifferent to these monsters that could only cause trouble for earth mages. The first floor, the second floor, the third floor. It was almost like an outing. Duque led the two girls through rooms, through boxes, and all kinds of high-altitude drops. Finally, they came to the fourth floor of Gnomerigan. It was an enormous steel passage. The passage of the fourth floor in reality was much larger than Duque had imagined. It was a full 50 meters wide and more than 30 meters tall. In the steel passage, there were iron floors and iron handrails all the way. With their dynamic vision, Aurelia and Vanessa easily captured a strange thing that was glowing red at the far end of the passage. It was hard to describe what it was. It was about the size of a dwarf and also had short limbs, except that its chest was extremely small, and its head was enormous. Of course, the so-called head was a red light that repeatedly scanned the surroundings. Duque raised his thumb and pointed at the thing in the distance. It's a mobile alarm system, commonly known as the Yaurao spirit. Of course, this thing is no threat to us. But, Vanessa, sneak over and see if it can detect you. Duque turned to Aurelia. As for you, please set up a few freezing traps in the direction of the Yao Yao spirit. Freezing trap. Any monster that steps on the trap will instantly turn into a huge block of ice. It will be immobilized for a short time. It was a skill that almost all hunters and rangers knew. Vanessa and Aurelia nodded and did as he said. 30 seconds later, Vanessa arrived in front of the so-called monster spirit. Stealth was a rogue skill that surpassed physical techniques. It could use the rogue profession's unique focus energy to distort the light around the body to achieve an effect that was invisible to the naked eye. Vanessa was very young, but no one could deny her outstanding talent as a rogue. She was very confident that no one would be able to detect her unless she was very close to a hunter or ranger who specialized in anti-stealth. She was wrong. Just as she was about to walk past the Yao Yao spirit and sneak, the strange iron lump suddenly made a sharp sound. Intruder! Intruder! Chapter 361. Not only did the huge red lamp shine brightly, but there was also a sharp noise. In the next moment, several huge metal objects dashed towards them. Vanessa wanted to use sprint while in stealth to move quickly and leave this weird thing. Who knew that Yao Yao's arm would shoot out a flashing flare, illuminating everything within a few meters, as if it was daytime. It directly broke Vanessa's invisibility. Ah! Little Vanessa finally cried out in shock. The metal creatures charged at them too, but they all stepped into Aurelia's trap and turned into large chunks of ice. At that moment, Duque shot a frost arrow and froze the Yao Yao into a large block of ice. Immediately, the huge steel tunnel returned to peace. The shock on Vanessa's face had yet to fade. Clearly, she couldn't accept that her stealth had been broken by such a weird thing. Duque asked Aurelia with a smile. How does little Vanessa's stealth compare to that of the trolls? At least better than 80% of trolls. That's enough. Enough? Enough, Duque said with absolute certainty. Sniffing the air, Aurelia pointed to the end of the tunnel. There seems to be a guy who can be called boss over there. Duque smiled. Whatever. That's not my goal. Duque walked over and unfroze the Yao Yao. Then, he stayed where he was and guided the nimble Vanessa to dismantle the mobile alarm robot. A bunch of data appeared on Duque's retina. You've obtained the preliminary blueprints for the mobile alarm system. Actually, that wasn't entirely true. As an engineering student who dabbled in construction equipment, Duque had already figured out most of the structure of this wiling. All in all, the gnome was really a genius. He had actually used the technology of the steam age to play with automatic control technology. That crazy enemy tracking system was actually capable of sensing vibrations and heat. This was simply beyond the limitations of the times of Tesla, Edison, and Einstein. Of course, it wasn't that the Yao Yao's technology was so advanced. Instead, the gnomes had used a lot of simple, violent, and miraculous devices when they designed this thing. For example, this vibration sensor was similar to the ancient seismograph from before Duque's transmigration, but it was more sophisticated. It was actually using the gear to sense the vibration between every step it took. In that short interval, no one would have realized that it was actually sensing the vibrations within a radius of tens of meters in a stationary state. Once there was a vibration, it would enter the next stage. I tested it with a heat-sensing stone. When it passed through again, it would automatically fire a flare in the direction of the heat source to further confirm whether the target was invisible or in a hidden state. The 3 types of confirmations ensured that there would be no mistake. Finally, there was the crazy high-frequency horn alarm. On top of that, it had an unscientific power system that leaned towards magic. A mobile alarm system robot appeared. Duque did not go to the final boss. It was not easy to clear out Gnomerigan. In addition to clearing out the traitor of the gnomes, he also had to block all the cracks between the rocks and clean up the weak radiation. Duque didn't have the spare time to do this. So, Duque took the 2 girls directly to the engineering laboratory. A day later, Duque returned to his private army and brought back a large number of the latest models of the goblins. System Elf, Are you sure there's no problem with this thing? Duque had deep dark circles under his eyes and looked tired. But it was worth it for the sake of the 30,000 soldiers. Dear host, I'm very sure. All the gravity sensors have been set to 150 kilograms. Only humanoid creatures that exceed this weight will trigger the alarm. And according to the host's habit, I've set the most prominent warning sound for the goblins. That's good. Duque almost emptied the entire engineering laboratory of Gnomerigan. McNeil, the great traitor who betrayed the great craftsman and all the gnomes, would probably go crazy on the spot if he found out. So after Duque gave some instructions, the army set off again. Few people knew that there was actually an engineering laboratory on the 4th floor of Gnomerigan. No one would know what Duque had done in that laboratory. Then, he moved the things in the laboratory to Karazhan. The soldiers of Stormwind looked curiously at a bunch of strange machines with bark on their heads, running around the army. Tick-tock made a strange noise. Then, it didn't seem to have any effect until that night. Windsor was puzzled by Duque's arrangement. Duque only left the minimum number of sentries, and instead deployed at least 200 rapid response troops. It was a cavalry unit that was forbidden to sleep all night. Their equipment was also very strange. Lassos with steel wires? Long-handled axes that were rarely used by cavalry? What the hell was that? Well, I've been a soldier for so many years. I've been at war for almost 2 years. This is the first time I've heard such a strange order. We're supposed to kill trolls after hearing the alarm in the middle of the night, preferably alive? I heard that trolls will heal themselves after a while, unless their heads are cut off or their hearts are pierced. Yes, there are basically no trolls near the Elven Forest. There are only a few occasionally near the Night Forest. But trolls are the norm in the Rotterdam continent, right? What's the alarm? None of the cavalrymen knew. As night fell, they quickly found out what the alarm was. Suddenly, in the darkness of the night, they heard a peerlessly mournful cry for help. Help! Murder! These guys are going to tear me apart. Every cavalryman had the word embarrassment written all over their faces. If it was a living person who shouted, there would be no problem. The problem was that the voice was obviously mechanical and electronic. Since it was an order from above, the cavalrymen quickly set off. When they arrived, they found a strange, flashing red demon spirit being chased by 2 trolls. Come and save me. There's someone acting cool here. We can't hold on any longer. Shouting incomprehensible words, the robot tried to run with its short legs. Originally, it could not outrun the trolls, but when the trolls saw the cavalrymen, they immediately ran back. Chasing a master of concealment troll in the dark was a very scary thing. They could be killed at any time. At this moment, the cavalrymen laughed. They did not know what kind of special paint was sprayed on the troll's body. Even in the darkness of the night, it was still extremely eye-catching. The trolls seemed to want to wipe it off, but the more they did, the bigger the lump became. After 2 ordinary troll scouts lost their concealment, was there any suspense in facing an aggressive squadron of cavalrymen? The next morning, the entire army saw the spoils of war from the Rapid Reaction Force. Chapter 362. Troll. Fresh out of the oven, a cute and lively troll. If you dare to go in and fight with your bare hands, the troll will definitely tear you apart. Silver scale breastplate 5 pieces. In the army, the logistics camp was in chaos. A group of Stormwind soldiers, who had never seen a troll before, fought to see the captured troll. There were all kinds of people in the camp. Windsor saw that they weren't doing well, and taught them a good lesson. As more and more troll were captured, many soldiers who had lived in the relatively peaceful Elven Forest for their entire lives saw a troll for the first time. A veteran who had experienced at least 5 battles, and was now a 2nd lieutenant of the Alliance, held a dagger and directly cut off one of the troll's fingers. Then he fed a piece of meat to the troll, and pointed at the finger that had already begun to regenerate, explaining in a loud voice. Do you see that? This is your new enemy, the troll. The 2nd lieutenant grabbed the troll that had tried to bite him by the hair, letting every soldier who got close to the trolls see clearly. Our ancestors have fought with these guys for generations. You were lucky to grow up in a relatively peaceful environment, but Stormwind City has fallen. However, Stormwind City has fallen, and the orcs who attacked our home have joined forces with the trolls, who once fought a bloody battle with our ancestors. Now they're all tribes. Green skin plus green skin. They're all F***king bad things. But that's not important. You just need to understand your enemy's weakness. The second lieutenant demonstrated how to slit the troll's throat. Wah! Almost everyone thought that the troll was dead for sure. But even though it was vomiting blood, even though it looked very wretched, everyone was shocked to find that the troll's throat was healing on its own. The blood it spat out decreased, and in the end, it even had the strength to curse in the troll language. Such a miraculous scene scared many people. Holy light above, are these evil creatures immortal? A soldier asked, trembling. Don't be silly. There are no creatures in this world that can't be killed. You can't kill it because you haven't found a way. With that, the second lieutenant stabbed the troll's heart. In the next 10 seconds the troll struggled fiercely. Then its legs gave way and it died. Oh. The soldiers finally let out sighs of relief. Giant demons are hard to kill, but they are not truly unkillable. He would die if his heart was pierced, and he would die if his head was cut off. Due to its powerful regenerative ability, unless you can guarantee your own safety, and leave the sharp weapon in its heart for more than 10 seconds, it is highly recommended that you deal with its brain. It was fine to pierce their heads with a spear, or chop them off with a sword. Clean and efficient, leaving no trouble. That was the scene in full swing. Aurelia followed Duque to inspect the camp. Wherever Duque went, there would be loud cheers. Sir Marcus, we agreed to take us back this time as well. Lord Marcus, when the orcs. Aurelia was surprised. I've never seen a troop with such a strange morale. Duque turned his head. Why is it strange? Because of my request. I want them to use a mere 30,000 people to chase, after over 100,000 tribes. It's very likely that it will end in total annihilation. Why doesn't anyone feel fear or despair? Aurelia bit her lip. After her initial craziness for the sake of Cule Salis passed, she began to realize more and more how difficult it was for Duque, as well as how much courage and boldness it took to send 30,000 elites to chase after the tribes. Aurelia felt very apologetic. Duque very naturally put his hand on Aurelia's shoulder and pointed to the warriors who were practicing and listening to lectures in full swing. Do you know why no one is afraid? Because the scene before them gives the warriors of Stormwind a strange sense of familiarity. They feel that they have stepped into victory mode again. Victory mode. Aurelia didn't realize how close her face was to Duque. Yes, that is, I first prepare them mentally. Then when they face an enemy that they know very well, they won't have any fear. That's right. The unknown is always frightening. When you thoroughly understand everything about the enemy, the ferocity and terror will only be a conversation topic after a meal, rather than a heavy psychological pressure. Duque used Nagas as instructors to train batches of Stormwind warriors. Facts have repeatedly proven Duque's wisdom and foresight. Sir Marcus is our god of prophecy. He will always lead us to victory. In any case, a commander who can play with the enemy leader is more reassuring than an idiot leading us. Aurelia's long ears heard almost deified worship and trust in Duque. For some reason, Aurelia felt sweet in her heart. Was it because of a moment of curiosity that I created the birth of a legend? Or is this fate? Thinking of the hardship she suffered for Duque, and thinking of how much Duque has done for her now, when her hometown is safe, how should she face Duque? For a moment Aurelia's heart was in chaos. At this moment, Duque mischievously blew into Aurelia's long ears. Realizing that Duque was playing with her, Aurelia had the heart to bite Duque to death. If there were not many people watching, Aurelia swore that she would definitely teach Duque a lesson. What are you thinking about? Thinking, when is this damn war going to end? Within this year, Duque said with absolute certainty. When the Battle of Cule Salis is over, I will tell you my inference. Inference, another inference. Obviously, it was only a judgment based on intelligence, But Aurelia felt that she was fighting with a god of fate. Incomparably relieved. Okay, I believe you. When Duke easily broke through the encirclement of the troll scouts and faintly created pressure, everyone felt that the trolls were only so after all. On this day, Duke's army marched for a full 80 kilometers. Even though this was Rotterdam's territory, and even though the roads were easy to travel on, it was still an unbelievable thing. When Orgrim learned that Duke's army was only 50 kilometers away, he gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. That night, Orgrim organized a fierce counterattack. He was prepared to let the entire tribe go out and get rid of Duke first. However, when the tribe ran for 20 kilometers, they saw red light all over the mountains and plains. Help! Orgrim night attack! A group of strange metallic humanoids screamed. Chapter 363. It turned out that the great tribal chief could instantly create so many blue veins on his forehead. Orgrim grabbed Zujin with one hand. Didn't you say that the trolls are the kings of the forest? Is there nothing in the forest that can escape your men's detection? Then what is this? Orgrim roared angrily, his saliva almost drenching Zujin's face cloth. Zujin was speechless as he followed Orgrim's finger. Half a quarter of an hour ago, his most trusted scout had reported to him that the road ahead was unimpeded. There were no traps, no enemies, and there were no sentries within 3 kilometers of the enemy. A while ago, many troll scouts who got too close to the human camp were caught. Zujin had always thought that it was because they got too close to the humans' magic traps. Just like the thousands of years of war between the trolls and the elves, the trolls still couldn't figure out the uses of the long-eared magic. The only two things the trolls could rely on were their numbers and strong vitality. Now it was clear that this was beyond the scope of magic. The red light that symbolized an alarm stretched from the horizon to the horizon. These strange metal creatures were shouting and yelling. The noise was so loud that it could even wake up a bear in the east. Now the horde had two choices. The first was to retreat, but this would hurt their morale. The second was to continue running and kill their way into the human camp within 2 hours. As long as they could stick to the humans, even if there was a loss of stamina, Orgrim firmly believed that his 100,000 beastmen and trolls could easily destroy this annoying tail. Gul'dan, I need you to contact Zuluhid. Orgrim ordered the evil warlock king not far from him. Gul'dan's face was filled with humility. Yes, great tribal chief. His wrinkled fingers drew a few runes that flowed with evil energy in the air. Along the mirror that appeared in the air, Orgrim saw his deputy. In the image, a strong gust of wind blew in the air. It was Zuluhid and his adult red dragon mount. Feeling the uncomfortable spiritual connection, Zuluhid frowned, but he still took the initiative to speak. Great tribal chief, the humans seem to have received the alarm, but they don't seem to be afraid of our attack. Or perhaps, they don't know how many of us are attacking. They sent less than 100 horsemen out of camp. But that long-eared powerhouse seems to be in the camp. I saw a wyvern cavalryman who got too close get shot to death. At this moment, Zujin suddenly came to a realization. That's right. The humans have never used more than 200 scouts to capture me. The thing they use to alert us seems to be able to spray something that we can't wash off and stick to the troll's body. It's something that can be seen clearly in the dark. Orgrim thought of many things in an instant. He didn't understand this new thing called humans. Looking at the alarms all over the mountains and plains emitting the same light, listening to them repeat the same monotonous sentence, Orgrim quickly got over the initial shock. Keep going. Get me one of those things. Zujin's figure disappeared. Even if he didn't fully acknowledge Orgrim's dominance, it was obvious that the troll had made a mistake this time. In less than 3 minutes, Zujin returned with a struggling metal object with a red glow on its head that looked like a living creature. Orgrim simply and violently smashed the thing with his hammer. Zujin was dumbfounded by his actions. I should have just smashed it and brought it over. No, there's a difference. If that's the case, I don't know if you brought all the parts. Orgrim carefully looked at the things on the wreckage, but he quickly felt a sense of displeasure at being fooled. Most of them were parts that he couldn't understand. Some were round, some were long, some had teeth. And there were even a few crystals that contained magical energy. Gul'dan, can you sense any mysterious communicative things? No, Chief. Gul'dan shook his head humbly. I can only sense things like totem poles that react when they come within a certain range. It was a passive sensing device. The chief's displeasure became even more obvious. In Orgrim's eyes, these things of the humans were like giant dwarven machines. They looked good but were useless and looked scary. But in reality, they could still be dealt with hammers and axes. In the end, this was no different from the simple traps that the beastmen use for hunting. It was like tying a bell on a string. If an idiot stepped on the string, the bell would immediately ring. Full speed attack. Orgrim raised the doom hammer, and his hand up high. 30 kilometers away, Aurelia stared at the wyvern that was hovering above the horizon. Will Orgrim fall for it? Aurelia asked Duque softly as she looked lovingly at her exhausted sister, who was resting on a bed. He will. Duque's face was full of confidence. Then, the two of them looked at the huge but empty camp. There were many humanoid creatures in the camp, but they were all scarecrows wearing armor. There were only 3,000 cavalrymen that actually traveled 80 kilometers in a day, but 1 man, 2 horses, and a large number of carriages carrying supplies. They used 3,000 people to create a huge camp that could accommodate 30,000 people. There were cauldrons boiling soup, chefs distributing black bread, and patrolling soldiers. It looked no different from an army. Only their own people knew that the soldiers were only pretending when the wyverns got a little closer. Even if they were the elites of Stormwind, the soldiers were exhausted. In fact, the main force was still 50 kilometers away. A smug smile appeared on Duke's face. The horde was getting closer. Duque's horde faithfully sent back all kinds of information. Other than the old mobile alarm system, robots from Nomerigan that were smashed by Orgrim at the beginning, all the robots within 20 kilometers were Duque's modified versions. Of course, not every horde was a high-end robot. Duque installed a simple control system that evolved from Morse code. Not all of the monsters revealed their faces. Most of them disguised themselves as small trees and fixed themselves in important positions as a passive enemy-seeking system. Although it was simple, it was enough for the system elf to summarize all the messages and calculate the number of horde that had reached a certain area. Close, close, even closer. When the horde's army finally appeared on the horizon and began to charge, Duque waited until the horde was 2 kilometers away before he waved his hand, and the 3,000 cavalrymen quickly ran away. Orgrim was about to go crazy with anger. Even though Duque's army was right under his nose, it felt like he was raising his hammer and preparing for close combat, while Duque ran into the range of the javelin. He raised his javelin and ran into the range of the catapult. When he pulled the catapult, the enemy was already so far away that he could only see the dust behind them. The chief almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 364. Money could not buy one's foresight. There was no medicine for regret in this world. Seeing Duque's men leave so quickly, Orgrim was filled with regret. Along the way, he had forced a group of warlike orcs to submit to him, and only then was he able to sneak, until now. While the demonic blood gave the orcs great strength and physique, it also increased their warlike nature to the extreme. This was a group of rebellious subordinates. To maintain the orcs' bloodthirst and desire for destruction, the tribe had to pay a high price. If Duque accepted the challenge, even if the tribe lost, Orgrim could still mediate. Now Duque's army was as slippery as a loach. If they did not fight, Orgrim could not do anything to Duque. Duque was clearly trying to drag the tribe to death. Now that the orcs and trolls had just joined forces, there were many conflicts that had not been resolved. In order to unite different forces and races, apart from having a common goal and non-conflicting interests, The most important factor was victory. Any new organization needed to be nourished by victory and success in order to grow. The reason why Duque could quickly gain such a high reputation in the alliance was because Duque was the ever-victorious marshal. Orgrim could not make a promise to the trolls and then delay attacking the elves. On the contrary, the longer he delayed, the better it was for the alliance. From the holy city of Stratholme to the east, it was basically barren land. Even if the tribe turned the sky upside down here, it would not affect Rotterdam too much. Moreover, once the hinterlands was cleared, Duque would receive 20,000 elite human soldiers and an entire Wormhammer dwarf griffin aeronauts as support. That was what Duque was using. Unfortunately, while Duque's calculations were accurate, Orgrim was even more ruthless. Looking at the empty human camp, every orc warrior's face was filled with anger and indignation. On the contrary, most of the trolls' eyes were filled with disdain and slight mockery. Orgrim yelled, "Everyone, do you see that? These are the cunning humans. Humans who never dared to fight the brave orcs head-on. Despicable, cowardly, shameless, lowly. But they played a trick on the brave orcs. Can we take this lying down? No. Never. Absolutely not." Tens of thousands of orcs roared and raised the weapons in their hands to vent the anger in their hearts. "I need a brave general to carry out a very dangerous, destructive mission for the tribe. Who's coming?" Immediately, more than 10 generals stepped forward. However, Orgrim eventually chose Nogar, Noggle the Flesh Shredder. This was a general from the Warsong clan, who was famous for his bravery and ruthlessness. When he crossed over to the world of Azeroth, he was just an insignificant pawn. Now he was a general. Where did his martial merit come from? Asked the human warriors that he had torn into pieces. In his hands, he had torn at least 3 champion knights apart. These warriors of the human world had become a part of his terrifying legend. Orgrim opened the detailed map he obtained from the humans. "I need you to select 10,000 of your most violent beastmen warriors to destroy this place and this place. Then they will meet up with us here. Can you do it?" Noggle's eyes shone with a bloodthirsty light. "No problem, great chief." The next morning Duque smiled bitterly. The Horde had the upper hand, so they had the right to divide their forces. 10,000 beastmen was not a lot, but it was not a small number either. If they went all out, Duque's army of 30,000 would have to change their route. But they could not ignore it either. This was because Orgrim clearly had Duque in his hands, or rather, the Alliance's weakness. After all, the Alliance was a coalition of different kingdoms. The Alliance was not like the Horde, where the Great Chief had a clear relationship with the chiefs of the various clans. The Alliance, especially the current Alliance, had to take care of the interests of the various kingdoms and the feelings of the people. Now, that division was directly behind Duque's army of 30,000, heading straight for Darrowshire in the south of Stratholme. In addition, an independent team was heading for Maris Farm to destroy Lordaeron's food production. When King Tyrrhenas heard this news, he almost peed his pants. Another 3 magic messages were sent within an hour. Duque was extremely annoyed. Why didn't the magic message blacklist me? Duque rubbed his forehead. After some thought, Duque put up a mental barrier. Now, no matter who sent a magic message, Duque would not be able to receive it. He also gave the System Alpha mission to develop a magic version of the blacklist. In the end, Duque decided to scare Tyrrhenas. Based on my analysis of the situation, the main force of the Horde is preparing to attack Stratholme. So, I can only focus on the Holy City and temporarily give up on attacking the Horde. Duque lied through his teeth. Alicia, who was in charge of sending the messages for Duque, rolled her eyes but still did it. No ordinary person would dare to bear the political pressure of the leader of the Alliance. One could imagine how much trouble and criticism Duque would face after this. Send my order. Evacuate all the people in the entire area, including Darrowshire, and have them hide in Caer Darrowshire or Stratholme. Send my order. Let Seamus clean up the remaining enemies in the hinterlands and build a fortress in the north. This was all for Hercule Salis. The price was that most of the cities in the area, except for Stratholme, would be burned to the ground. Aurelia pursed her lips and held Duque's hand tightly. It was the 18th of May. On this day, the main force of the horde finally left the human territory and entered Kuel Salis. Be quiet or die, Zhu Jin warned his men sternly. They were quickly passing through the forest and entering Kuel Salis. Even though they had not yet reached the damned forest with the protection of magic, Zhu Jin did not mind having an appetizer. His sharp senses were warning him that the elf was not far ahead. He slowed down and nimbly took each step on the tree. Zhu Jin's movements were so silent that it was hard to imagine that he was a troll over 2 meters tall. His huge and slightly slender body had an unimaginable softness and agility. Zhu Jin did not even touch a single leaf or twig. He held the axe, which was infused with the beast war spirit, with both of his hands as he lightly flew from tree to tree. He did not want the elves to know that they were coming, at least not now. Together with the Amani trolls around him, he silently watched as a team of 20 elven border patrols walked into their ambush. Chapter 365. The trolls who were almost at the top of the tree silently readied their weapons. Most of them revealed their sharp triangular teeth, revealing a sinister smile. This was a grudge that had lasted for thousands of years. To the trolls, ever since this pale-skinned, pointy-eared intruder first set foot on this continent 6,800 years ago, they had been stealing territory from the great Amani Empire. They gradually seized control of this land. They had the speed, stealthiness, and even agility of trolls. These elves also had many powerful advantages, the most powerful of which was their damned magic. The trolls had never come into contact with magic before, so they had no way of fighting back against those mysterious attacks, or breaking through their arcane defenses. The only thing they could do was to use their high-speed regeneration of flesh and blood, their advantage in numbers, and their lives to suppress these hateful elves. The trolls had once succeeded. Their ancestors had used their blood to create epic troll weapons, using up the last drop of magic in the elven bloodline, and almost completely annihilated these weak fellows. But 2,000 years ago, the elves and the despicable humans formed an alliance. These two pale-skinned races completely destroyed the Amani Empire. They took down fortresses, burned castles, burned the Amani Empire's cultural essence to the ground, and slaughtered tens of thousands of their fellow trolls. The once ruler of the planet, the great Amani Empire, was shattered, and no longer had its former glory. All that was left was the shadow of thousands of years of continuous defeats, like maggots in a bone, entangling the souls of every troll. The trolls were no longer able to restore their glory and take back everything that belonged to them. Until now, the appearance of the horde gave them hope for revenge. Zhu Jin was willing to believe in them. Orgrim Doomhammer, a bold and wise leader of the horde, promised to help them rebuild the Amani Empire. In fact, when the humans and orcs started the war, Zhu Jin had tried to reunite the trolls of the various tribes. Amani Fire Tree, Rotten Moss, Evil Tooth, Evil Branch, Burning Bramble, Deadwood. These forest troll tribes that had been divided for countless generations, and had long become enemies and hated each other, had for the first time found common ground in the face of a greater and more glorious goal. One by one, Zhu Jin challenged and defeated the leaders of these clans, whether it was through battles, competitions, or something else. All of them had already knelt before him. They and their tribes would all listen to his commands. The forest trolls banded together once more. Apart from that, the Frostmane clan, and the other frost troll clans that had lost their territories to the Bronzebeard dwarves, had also joined the army of revenge. With the help of the tribe, they would clean up the world in a similar way as the humans and elves, and then regain control of the forest. The orcs showed no interest in the forest at all. Zhu Jin suspected that they would occupy the valleys and plains of this world. Let the orcs go, but the trolls only wanted the forest. Standing on the tree, Zhu Jin's sinister smile widened as he looked down at the elves who didn't know that they had stepped into the gates of hell. Zujin, who had also grown up immersed in the mud of hatred and revenge, completely understood the feelings of his compatriots. They had already infiltrated deep into the elves' homeland and were preparing to slaughter the elves on the land that they had stolen from their hands, the land that the elves believed to be their homeland and incomparably safe. Let the elves taste the feeling of losing their homes and being slaughtered. Suddenly, the sound of wind breaking overhead alerted some of the patrolling elves. It was already too late. The trolls weren't known for their strength, but that was relative to the orcs. In this environment where they would have to fight at close quarters in less than 2 seconds, the weakness of the elves' lack of individual combat ability was magnified many times over. Zujin jumped down from the tree, and his huge feet landed right on top of the heads of 2 elves. The huge weight and the acceleration of gravity easily broke the necks of the 2 elves. Before his feet even touched the ground of the forest, Zujin threw out his axe with a strange technique. The sharp giant axe, spinning in midair, easily flew between the 2 elves. Before they could react, the spinning blade of the axe had already sliced open the throat of the elf who was facing Zujin. In less than half a second, the axe cut deeply into the head of the elf, who was slightly further back. The other axe did the same. The speed at which it fell was almost as fast as the 2 elves, who had been trampled to death by Zujin. The remaining 4 elves lost their lives and collapsed, their blood splattering on the leaves of the forest grass. It was a ghastly sight. Before they could even scream, the rest of the elves were also taken care of by the trolls who descended from the sky like lightning. Zujin was very satisfied with this ambush that was like an appetizer. Cut off their heads and hang them up. If there's a chance, tell the elves that the trolls are coming. On all fronts in the southern part of the Longsong Forest, the trolls attacked the elven patrols in a frenzy. Some troll armies easily won, while others paid a heavy price. What? You're saying that some of the elves predicted our arrival and made arrangements to surround and kill us? Zujin was very confused by his subordinate's report. If this was a battle where the trolls were warned from above, then the trolls' losses would undoubtedly be much greater. Unfortunately, the trolls only suffered a crushing defeat in less than a fifth of the area. The rest were overwhelming victories. Whatever, we'll leave the rest to the orcs. Let's see if Orgrim can break through those damned elven defensive spells like he promised. What are you doing? When Gul'dan approached Orgrim, the great chief barked out a warning question. There are some things that you should see for yourself, Great Doomhammer. Gul'dan bowed deeply. Orgrim nodded and put the hammer on his shoulder, indicating for Gul'dan to lead the way. Gul'dan turned around and led Doomhammer and his personal guards back. Soon, they arrived in front of a large pit that had been dug out. At the bottom of the pit was a large stone, and the rough surface of the stone had countless intricate runes drawn on it. Those strokes were definitely the work of a clever creature. But that wasn't the point. Even someone like Doomhammer, who knew nothing about mystical abilities and spiritual power, could feel the energy emanating from this heavy stone. This is the elven trap? Orgrim asked. Yes, and it's not just a trap. Chapter 366. Gul'dan stroked his beard and replied, This thing is filled with energy. I believe that these runestones and the other runestones at the edge of the forest are evenly distributed here, forming a large magic trap and barrier. What barrier? They didn't stop us or cause any damage, Orgrim pointed out. No, because we're only using our bodies to enter the forest and use normal weapons, Gul'dan replied. I believe that these runestones restrict the use of magic. It's very likely that only the elves can cast their spells in this area. I've tried to cast some spells here before, but they all failed. If I retreat 10 steps to the other side of the mountain, I can cast spells again. Orgrim was solemn. This was no laughing matter. He clearly remembered how destructive human magic was. If it wasn't for the Beastman warlocks suppressing the human mages, the Beastmen would have had to pay a heavy price to defeat the humans. This was why he didn't exterminate the Shadow Council that he hated so much. Human magic originated from the elves. He knew how powerful Gul'dan was. Even after he was injured, Gul'dan's magic was still the strongest among the beast men. The battle against the human's strongest mage, Antonidas, in South Shore proved Gul'dan's strength. Yet Gul'dan told himself that his magic couldn't be used. What about the trap? It seems to be able to draw out the powerful force hidden in the forest, as long as those long ears want it. Boom! Gul'dan grinned, his mouth making sounds as if he was about to explode. How many can it deal with at once? Gul'dan laughed sinisterly as he raised 5 fingers. 5,000? Orgrim probed. 50,000. And as long as it's within the range of the rune, as long as it's densely packed, killing 10,000 trolls isn't a problem. The great chief immediately recalled the day Stormwind City was conquered, where thousands of Beastman warriors were burned to death in the flames. Even though the Blackrock tribe Beastmen had a certain level of fire resistance, they weren't immune to fire. If the fire was big enough, they would still be injured and die. After Orgrim knew the answer, he jumped in fright and simply raised his hammer. His meaning was very clear. Is there any way to destroy it? No, this is too wasteful. I can turn it into a storm altar and use the power of the runestone to strengthen creatures. Gul'dan's hunchback body gave off an evil aura. No orcs will participate in your strengthening. The great chieftain refused sharply. They have indeed become stronger. Orgrim stared at Gul'dan, his eyes filled with killing intent. Stronger, greener, less intelligent, and more violent. Gul'dan lowered his head. He did not plan to openly oppose the great chief at this time. I plan to strengthen the ogres. Perhaps there will be some changes in their bodies. But that has nothing to do with the orcs. It had nothing to do with him, so he let it go. Feeling that the loss of the tribe's elites would cause their fighting power to drop, Orgrim agreed. Just like how he agreed to let the dead humans become Death Knights to join the tribe. The preparations went smoothly and took a lot of time. Initially, Orgrim thought that Zujin would be impatient. Unexpectedly, Zujin said, "My ancestors spent hundreds of years and still couldn't break this barrier. I don't mind waiting a few days or months as long as I can break it. The trolls can wait." After saying this, Zujin ran off to kill the elven patrols outside. After Gul'dan used his evil dark magic and rituals to break the outermost layer of the runestone's protection, he ordered Guggle, the twin-headed ogre hero, to carefully and orderly dismantle this giant runestone. This was a highly skilled and physically demanding job. If he used brute force to dismantle it, the result would be obvious. A certain clumsy ogre activated the protection on the runestone. But what happened? The unlucky ogre was blasted 30 meters into the air. Then, his entire body broke into tens of thousands of pieces that were evenly scattered over an area of 100 square meters. Even if the ogre's mother came here, she would not be able to recognize that this was her child. It took them a full 8 hours to completely dig out this runestone. Fortunately, Orgrim had brought some elites and the trolls as the vanguard here first. Otherwise, he could only let the army of 100,000 wait. Now the army of 100,000 was still advancing 60 kilometers away. On the other side, Guggle skillfully smashed the giant runestone into a few large pieces. He brought 5 of the pieces to the clearing and spent a few more hours correcting the shape of the runestone. He placed it in the correct shape of a 5-pointed star on the clearing above the energy vein of the forest. "Is everything ready?" Gul'dan asked impatiently. Not far away, both of Guggle's heads shook their heads. The giant ogre grunted like a pig. He carried the last piece of the runestone, which weighed at least 5 tons, with his strong and explosive arms. "It's done now," he shouted, rubbing his shoulder with one hand. Gul'dan finally nodded in satisfaction. He could not imagine how he would handle the runestone, which was the size of a small mountain, without enough manpower. The runestone was huge, heavy, and had a strange center of gravity deviation. 2 ogres could lift it, but it would require at least a dozen orcs to do it. Orgrim hated magic, and would never let the noble orcs do such a dangerous thing. Fortunately, the great chief allowed Gul'dan to use some ogres to do it. And Google could command his stupid one-headed orcs more easily than any other orc. Yes, when faced with a bunch of muscular retards, it did not matter if you were a world-class intellectual or not. You would still go crazy. Gul'dan could calculate how the elves moved the runestones to their original positions the first time. That had nothing to do with magic. Magic was powerful, but compared to the energy needed to lift 100 kilograms of weight with magic, it was better to use slaves. Forest trolls were about as strong as ogres, but they were much smarter, and they would listen to specific commands. However, the elves did not have the habit of keeping forest troll slaves for long periods of time. The runestone was finally placed in the correct position. Even Gul'dan could not find any fault with it. Gul'dan waved his hand, and the 5 orc warlocks each chose one of the runestone and stood beside it. Fortunately, Orgrim's brain is only filled with schemes and muscles, and he did not kill all of my men. Otherwise, they would not have been able to complete this ritual. Chapter 367. Just like before, while Gul'dan believed that he would succeed, he wasn't completely sure. However, as an evil warlock with an unparalleled spirit of exploration, there was nothing he couldn't sacrifice. Furthermore, Gul'dan believed that if he failed, he would survive unscathed. Let's begin. He nodded to Kurger, who was shouting at the assembled ogres. He was recruiting lab rats. After some pushing and shoving, grunting and cursing, the weakest of the ogres walked forward. Of course, no matter how weak he was still several times heavier and twice as tall as a human. Google shouted an order at the ogre. The ogre looked like he was ready to die a martyr, shrugging his shoulders as he walked into the empty space in the middle of the stones. He stood in the middle of the pentagram and waited, not moving. One of the strengths of the ogres was that they would stand firmly after being asked to. If not for another order or to find food, an ogre could stand there for hours, not moving an inch like a marble statue. Gul'dan often felt that these fellows had evolved from stones. This could also explain their thick skin that could easily block blades, as well as their ridiculously low intelligence. If Gul'dan ordered them to move forward, they would first spend a few seconds thinking about their demon life, perhaps thinking about the human delicacy they ate the night before drooling. Then, they would randomly choose a direction to move forward, killing everything they didn't like along the way. Sometimes this included their own kind or their master. If he had a choice, Gul'dan definitely wouldn't order these idiots around without Gul'dan's permission. With Google around, at least these idiots would walk in the right direction, and they wouldn't have to worry about hurting their own people. Of course, efficiency was still a mystery. Sometimes they could contemplate life while being stabbed in the thigh with a knife. Only with the twin-headed ogre around would their efficiency reach a passable standard. Gul'dan's thoughts returned to the present. He raised his arm and began to resonate with the dark energy that the Burning Legion's vice leader, Kil'jaeden, had bestowed upon him in Draenor. The evil power tore through the plane and crossed through space, pouring into Gul'dan's body. As a medium, he immediately split it into 5, sending it to the soul crystals in front of the 5 warlocks' chests, and then into the rune stones in front of them. The stench, decay, and depravity were corroding the arcana power that originated from nature. This was not without cost. The origin of nature instinctively resisted the corrosion and invasion. A dazzling radiance burst forth from the depths of the earth, and was directly transmitted to the runestone. The energy visible to the naked eye fiercely attacked the 5 warlocks who attempted to pollute the runestone. The power of the counterattack was so violent that the skull staff of the warlock standing in the south cracked on the spot. Less than half a second after the stench and filthy death aura flowed out, the power of the earth seemed to have found a vent and suddenly attacked the warlock. Woo! The unlucky ones with insufficient strength were always the first to suffer. The power of nature crashed into that guy's body like a raging wave. One could see that there were unknown plants growing out of every pore on his arms. Trash! Gul'dan spat. Without needing his reminder, Gujar grabbed the dead warlock and took his place. 3 seconds later, Gul'dan had to do the same thing as the two-headed ogre magician. This helpless feeling of having to personally take the field made Gul'dan very unhappy. Fortunately, the remaining 3 fellas were clearly a cut above the 2 dead men from before. Now, the 5 pharaoh each chose a stone in front of them and poured dark energy into it. When all the rune lines on the 5 runestones were filled with black light and vibrated, Gul'dan focused his mind and chanted a short incantation. Every note of the evil spell contained a taboo smell of blood, which made Orgrim, who was watching from the side, very uncomfortable. The great tribal chief frowned. Unfortunately, he had no other choice. Shamans were not good at breaking through enemies' magic defenses, and the only powerful shaman under him was Zuluhid, whose strength was clearly 2 levels lower than Gul'dan's. More dark energy flowed through Gul'dan's wrinkled skin and into his runestone from his scarlet fingertips. But this time, it wasn't just a simple injection of energy. The overflowing demonic aura turned into a black comet, passing through the stone on his left at high speed, before jumping towards the stone on his right. The demon's power did not stop there. It continued to move to the near left, then to the far right, and finally returned to the stone in front of him. A glowing pentagram connected all 5 stones. Wherever the black comet passed, it would quickly turn black. There would no longer be any signs of life. Countless complicated runes would appear on the ground. In the next moment, the sky above the altar suddenly darkened. The corrosive energy shot thousands of meters into the air before exploding. Soon, a strange storm appeared in the sky. It was made up of a white tornado that moved clockwise, and a black tornado that moved counterclockwise. The storm stretched from the ground to thousands of meters in the sky, and could be seen clearly from hundreds of miles away. This terrifying storm alarmed the entire area. All the high elves who were fighting the trolls were alarmed. The ogre in the pentagram was still like a statue, standing there stiffly, even though Gul'dan could see the clear fear in that fellow's eyes. Unfortunately, he was facing Gugul, a natural 2-headed ogre, the absolute ruler of the ogres. No matter how afraid he was, even if Gugul wanted him to die, he had to obey. Very good. Gugul chose a good guy. Gul'dan grinned evilly. The power of the earth resonated with the sky. The power of the magic runestone was directed by Gul'dan to the ogre standing in the middle. He wasn't trembling, but his heart was trembling. A black halo enveloped him. At first it was one circle, then countless circles. The black energy seemed to solidify as it poured onto the ogre's body. More and more energy poured onto him, finally forming a huge black sphere. The entire ogre was swallowed by this impenetrable black sphere. The immeasurable dark energy turned into a black storm, drilling into the ogre's body through every pore. Aha! The ogre finally couldn't help but scream. Moments later, the screams doubled. 2 heads were screaming at the same time. Chapter 368. Gul'dan was trembling, but he was trembling in excitement from this new creation. A few minutes later, as the light gradually dissipated, the creature standing in the middle slowly revealed its true appearance. Gul'dan eagerly waited for the light to fade, so that he could see the creature that his storm altar had created. There was still an ogre standing in front of them, but there were some changes to this creature. Although it was larger than before, some of its proportions had changed. Its stomach was not as large, its arms were not as long, and its legs were not as curved, making it more agile. It also had 2 heads. This was definitely an unexpected surprise. No one knew better than Gul'dan what a twin-headed ogre represented. In Draenor, twin-headed ogres were very rare. They were larger and stronger than their own kind, and more coordinated. They were worshipped by all single-headed ogres, and were recognized as the supreme kings of the ogres. Gugul was one of them. No, he was even rarer. He was proven to have enough intelligence to be a mage. Gul'dan had found this twin-headed ogre when he was still young, and trained him very seriously. Gugul was a reliable assistant and a powerful warlock, and he had accompanied Gul'dan to this day. Now it seemed that Gugul was no longer alone. A twin-headed ogre. and it was clear that he had high intelligence and coordination. Most importantly, this kind of ogre mage with 2 heads was born with the talent of casting multiple spells. He could maintain his powerful close combat abilities, while also casting unparalleled spells. The power that came from the source allowed the twin-headed ogre mage to quickly recognize Ghoul Dan as his master. Then, Ghoul Dan had Google explain to him everything he needed to know about the horde. The ogre mage listened quietly, absorbing everything like a sponge absorbing water. The birth of this mage was definitely good news for Ghoul Dan, who lacked soldiers. Of course, to Orgrim, these were larger and more powerful warriors. The great chief did not care that these new creatures were completely loyal to Ghoul Dan and not him. For a horde with such a large population, twin-headed ogres and ogre mages were just a small part of it. As long as he controlled the entire tribe, no matter what kind of thoughts the people under him had, they had to serve the tribe. Orgrim smiled and turned to leave. Because Ghoul Dan would complete the rest of the work, the great chief did not care how many twin-headed ogres this power could create. Orgrim's focus had always been on the bigger picture, such as the complete loyalty of the trolls. However, an accident interrupted his good mood. Something happened to Zujin. It was a premeditated ambush, a sharp arrow that almost pierced Zujin's heart. This almost ruined Orgrim's plan to bring the trolls into the new horde. Seeing the familiar emerald arrow on Zujin's chest, Orgrim raised his eyebrows. Just a centimeter more and Zujin's heart would have exploded. The entire arrow, over 60 centimeters long, pierced through Zujin's body. Moreover, the strange power contained within the arrow refused the ogre's healing ability. To make matters worse, Zulu had told the great chief that pulling it out by force might cost Zujin's life. Orgrim was very clear of Zujin's importance, since the other troll tribes had just submitted to him, and had yet to complete the alliance between the beastmen and trolls. Zujin, who was equivalent to the great chief of the trolls, was indispensable. Orgrim gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "Who did it? Aurelia? Or Sylvanas?" Orgrim could not remember every enemy's name, but the most outstanding ones could not be ignored. "I don't know. There were 3 very powerful female elven rangers who looked very similar to me." Zujin gritted his teeth and replied, "More accurately, there were 4 of them, but the last one was slightly weaker." 3, 4. Of course, Orgrim did not know about the Windrunner sisters, just like how it was difficult for him to differentiate between different races. Face blindness after crossing races was a common case. "Rest well, the tribe will avenge you," Orgrim comforted Zujin. From what he saw, Zujin would need a lot of time to get rid of the mysterious green power. Who knew that Zujin would suddenly pull him back? "I saw the changes of the times, and I saw how insignificant I am. So I need power. Power of magic. Mysterious power. I heard that you used the elven runestones to make an altar." Gul'dan's altar? Orgrim had never been too interested in Gul'dan's evil magic, so he had to remind Zujin. "The latest news is that out of every 10 ogres, 3 will die during the ritual, 6 will become 2-headed ogres during the ritual, and only 1 will truly obtain the power of magic." Zujin coughed out some green blood. "Isn't it just a chance to die, grow another head, or become a deformed monster? For the sake of the troll's revenge, I have nothing to fear." Orgrim looked down on this kind of personal hatred, but he was moved by the sacrifice of the entire race. Zujin wanted to sacrifice himself, or pay some other price to obtain this kind of ethereal evil power. This was also a kind of honor. Orgrim did not refuse. "When you think it is appropriate, Gul'dan will perform the ritual for you." When Gul'dan heard this news, he grinned in joy. "Perhaps I can truly control a great demon chieftain?" An hour later, the storm altar was fully activated again. The power drawn from the sky was modified by the runestones, turning into dense dark energy that accurately hit the Troll King's chest. The dark evil aura wrapped around the green arrow in Zujin's chest. Under the tearing of this level of terrifying power, the green energy that seemed to have formed an endless cycle was easily crushed and devoured by the darkness. A large bloody hole appeared in Zujin's chest. The ritual was not over yet. Getting rid of the power that Windrunner had left in Zhu Jin's chest was only the first step. When the other runestones poured more dark energy into Zhu Jin's body, the Troll King's chest began to swell up. It was not just his chest. Almost every inch of Zhu Jin's body, from his neck to his shoulders to his arms, to his waist to his thighs, was swelling up. More demonic power entered the wound on Zhu Jin's chest. The wriggling bloody wound was like a huge and ferocious mouth, as if it was devouring the dark energy. Finally, a gust of dark wind burst out of Zhu Jin's body. Chapter 369. Young man, do you want to be a magical girl? Oh, no, Zhu Jin, do you want to be a magic troll? Trolls were actually quite adaptable. Apart from paladins, trolls could advance into almost any profession. Considering that trolls also had the bloodthirst talent of minor berserk, it was generally agreed that trolls should be hunters. Of course, for heroes, the definition of professions was very vague. Just like Zhu Jin, he was a warrior, but he had the agility of a thief. Now, with the infusion of power from the Storm Altar, Zhu Jin had awakened a new profession, druid. Roar dash, this was the roar of a giant bear. The image of a giant dark bear, that was as large as a small hill, appeared on Zhu Jin's back. All of the observing giant demons shuddered. Next, there was a clear cry of an eagle. The giant bear image turned into a giant eagle image with gray-brown feathers, and a wingspan of over 100 meters. Zhu Jin greedily absorbed the energy of the world. But at this moment, Gul'dan's expression was not good. Zhu Jin's nature power was rejecting the darkness power from entering. Gul'dan could clearly feel that Zhu Jin was merging the darkness power into his berserk bloodline. Because of the boiling blood, it weakened the darkness power. The biggest problem was that the darkness power conflicted with Zhu Jin's awakened talent. If he forcefully injected the darkness power, Zhu Jin would explode and die. Orgrim was staring at Gul'dan. Zhu Jin's subordinates were also staring at Gul'dan. For power, Zhu Jin did not fear death. But could Gul'dan let Zhu Jin die now? They had not even fought a proper battle against the elves, and Zhu Jin, the only one who could control the trolls, was going to die. Regardless of whether Orgrim would let Gul'dan go, the other trolls would be the first to not let him go. The trolls might even fight with the beastmen, right in front of the elves. That would not be worth it. Tisk, Gul'dan lightly spat, Nagudalokasaksi. He chanted an incantation, dispelling the darkness power on the runestone. Even though it was still the power of the demon that controlled the runestone, what was being transferred to Zhu Jin was the purer nature power. Zhu Jin's body stopped expanding. It had expanded to its limit, and the blood vessels that were about to explode finally had the space to shrink back. Zhu Jin's eyes suddenly widened, and a terrifying divine light burst out from his fierce and lifelike eyes. I feel power, the power of the great bear and the eagle. It is the power of the earth. It is the power of the sky. Zhu Jin's entire body was suddenly wrapped in green light. In just half a second, Zhu Jin had turned into a huge eagle. It flapped its gigantic wings that were more than 5 meters long on one side, stirring up more than 10 tornadoes on its wings, easily blowing away all the leaves on the towering trees on the periphery of the clearing. The bare tree trunk stood out in the lush and luxuriant forest in the summer. In the next moment, Zhu Jin's body began to shrink again. It wasn't that his power had weakened, but that his power had become more condensed. It was like a retracted fist. Only when it attacked would the effect be even more frightening. Walking down the altar with large strides, Zhu Jin appeared to be even more powerful and spirited. Walking proudly in front of Orgrim, Zhu Jin knelt down on one knee for the first time. Even though the posture was rather crude and unsightly, it was still a kneel. This symbolized the true acknowledgement and submission of the great demon to the orc tribe. Orgrim's chest heaved up and down rapidly. Why did he want to attack the elves from 1,000 miles away? Of course, he knew that the elves were also targets that the tribe had to conquer or destroy. After all, the elves hadn't officially joined the war yet. It wasn't wise to rashly let a powerful opponent join them. If there were additional allies that the orcs could easily accept, or even the loyalty of subordinate races, then it would be a good deal. Now Orgrim's wait was finally here. Good, good, good. Orgrim hurriedly helped Zujin up. I said that the orcs and great demons are brothers. Frustrated that the attributes of the storm altar had changed again, Gul'dan had Gujar destroy the rune lines on the runestone and abandoned the altar. Deep into the night, not a single tribe was left. An altar that had lost its effectiveness was worthless. Just as the entire forest was shrouded in darkness, a few figures suddenly appeared near the altar. Despicable great demons. Despicable tribe, they actually destroyed the runestone. The one in front was Aurelia. As the eldest daughter of the Windrunner family, and an elf who loved this land, she had always felt that it was her duty to protect it. She knelt down on one knee and inspected the runestone fragments around the altar, a pained expression on her face. The elf safety barrier, a gigantic magical barrier that had been unbreakable for thousands of years, had been destroyed by Gul'dan just like that. Duque appeared beside Aurelia and gently pressed his hand on her shoulder. Tomorrow morning, bring the broken runestone to the Silver Moon Council. Aurelia immediately interrupted Duque. No, I'll go now. Let's see what those blind counselors have to say this time. The most famous Ranger General was filled with a towering rage. There's no rush. Unless Silvery Moon City is directly attacked, it would be troublesome to summon the counselors in the middle of the night. It's tomorrow morning anyway. Duque easily pacified Aurelia. Then what are we going to do tonight? The one speaking was Windsor Windrunner, the third sister of the Windrunner generation. In the original history, she was already the youngest female member of the family. It was a pity that there was still Lilith who was standing beside him. She was the youngest of them all. Did you think that my painstaking effort to get you to ambush Zujin was a waste of effort? At the mention of Zujin, the four Windrunner sisters gritted their teeth in hatred. In Duke's original plan, it would be best if he could directly destroy Zujin. As the most important link between the beastmen and great demons, Chief Orgrim was the most difficult to kill. On the other hand, Zujin was completely defenseless. The current Zujin was no longer the Amani tribe chief who had awakened new powers and caused havoc in Zulaman. Unfortunately, even if he found the four Windrunner sisters to work with him, he still could not take Zujin's life. Duque's plan was always one ring after another. Knowing that Gul'dan had used the storm altar to strengthen a large number of ogres, Duque had an idea. After Zujin suffered a setback, Zujin would definitely seek greater power. However, Zujin's attributes were incompatible with the storm altar. Chapter 370. In order to maintain control over the trolls, Great Chief Orgrim would definitely let Zujin walk onto the altar, and he could not let Zujin die on the altar. Now Duque had made the right bet. Gul'dan had left early, leaving behind an altar that still had a lot of energy. While the runestone was still intact, Duque could not risk a group of elven girls going berserk and touch it. Furthermore, he did not have the skills to do so. When Gul'dan wanted to get the runestone, he did not have the ability to deal with a former demigod warlock, who was now a Breaking Dawn villain. Furthermore, Orgrim and the trolls' elites were all here. Just a few of them running over would be asking for death. Now everything was different. Something stolen by an enemy would be taken by an ally. The rule of this world was that the ally was the new owner of the item. To return the item to its original owner, a corresponding price had to be paid. Even if the four Windrunner were here, they did not feel that Duque had done anything wrong. Duque bowed slightly, showing respect to one of the important figures behind him. Archbishop Fail Uther, I'll have to trouble you. Gul'dan's sorcery was impossible to defend against. That unimaginable power was something that Duque did not want to touch unless he had no other choice. To purify evil, he needed professionals. For this, the prepared Duque had personally invited 2 gods from the Church of Holy Light, as well as a teleportation service. Archbishop Alonso's Fail smiled and nodded. Let me see. A moment later, Alonso smiled. The Gul'dan you speak of is indeed a very evil and powerful warlock. However, I discovered that he seemed to have some reservations, and did not completely contaminate these runestones. The remaining curse is not too strong. I can get rid of it in a few minutes. Then I'll leave it to you, Archbishop. If possible, try not to cause too much of a commotion. Duque was definitely playing with fire. The Horde's vanguard was less than 30 kilometers from here, while the Horde's main force was 20 kilometers away. If he caused a commotion, the Horde's dragon knights would arrive in a moment. However, Duque had to seize the opportunity. The High Elves' runic magic circle was a complete defense system with 8 in a row. Apart from this one, Gul'dan had destroyed another 2. So the large amount of energy gathered by the rune stones would quickly dissipate due to the destruction of the rune stones. If he missed this opportunity, he wouldn't be able to find it. This was the only time he could take advantage of the High Elves. There were no other opportunities. In fact, these runestones were processed by countless elven mages and craftsmen over hundreds of years, and it took nearly 1,000 years for them to be completely calibrated. One could well imagine how precious it was. In just a few minutes, Fail had finished dispelling the evil magic. With a warm smile on his face, he said, "My job is very simple. On the other hand, restoring the runic lines embedded in it is a huge project." Duque sighed. "That's my problem." Without hesitation, he opened the portal and sent Fao and Uther away. If the great Archbishop accidentally died in Cule Salis because of Duque's risky plan, Duque would bet 50 cents that Lothar would definitely come after him. And then, Sylvanas put her hands on her hips. "Don't tell me, Duque, that you're going to spend 10 days to half a month here to rebuild these rubble?" Queen Sylvanas actually wanted to say that they were powdered, completely destroyed runestone fragments. Each piece was not much bigger than a bean, regardless of whether they could be put back together like a puzzle. Even if they could be put back together, how effective would they be? At this moment, Duque was saying in his heart, "Hey, System Elf, time to work. Hey, my host, do you really know how to order people around? Is there anyone? Where is he? Why don't I see him?" Duque looked around, but not in front of him. "Host, you've lost your integrity. You weren't like this before," the System Elf said sharply. "Cut the crap and get to work." Duque glared. "All right." A series of system notifications popped up. "Begin scanning. Start analyzing the damaged shape of each runestone. Starting comparison. Hand of magic, activate." Under the astonished gazes of the few guys who followed him, more than 200 hands of magic quickly picked up the rubble of various sizes from the ground, and then glued them together with special glue that had been prepared. Gavin Rad, who was next to him, rolled his eyes with his hammer, as if his boss wasn't human. The hands of magic flew at high speed, with all kinds of dazzling crisscrossing movements. At first, Sasha, who was the most curious of the Windrunner sisters, tried to follow the trajectory of Duque's hands of magic with her eyes. Unfortunately, Sasha quickly fainted. She looked like she was about to faint. Sasha took the opportunity to lean on her elder sister's shoulder and asked in a low voice, "Sis, is your boyfriend really a human?" Aurelia's face was full of embarrassment. Boyfriend? Aurelia hadn't really thought about this word. Although they both vaguely felt that it was the case, the last layer of thin veil was never revealed. Suddenly exposed by her own sister, Aurelia's face was burning. Admit it. Or not. That was a problem. Admit it. How much? That was also a problem. At this moment, Sylvanas abruptly helped her elder sister out of the situation. "Humph. You want to pick the most beautiful and mature flower of the Windrunner family? You'll have to ask us 3 sisters first." Sasha decisively joined in the fun. Aurelia looked at Sasha, the younger sister who looked similar to her, but had bright silver hair, and had mixed feelings. She didn't know how to tell her sister that if they successfully saved Cule Salis this time, she and Sylvanas would become Duque's vassals according to the agreement. There was a sense of reluctance to part, but also a sense of confusion that this seemed to be a good thing. While the 3 sisters were fooling around, Duque had finished reassembling the runestone. A completely 3D runestone pattern that had been magnified 10 times appeared in Duque's spiritual sea. After comparing Gul'dan's storm altar array with the magic pattern on the runestone, the system finally came up with a result. It was the result of thousands of elven mages' calculations for hundreds of years. Just like how Duque reverse-deduced a complete spell from a simple magic model, he easily deduced how the complete storm altar system worked based on the leftover materials. Done. Duque raised his hand, and the runestone that had been reconstructed immediately disappeared in the wind. He turned to look at the rest of the runestone fragments. Using Gavinrad almost as a 3D printer, Duque held Gavinrad's arm with Hand of Magic and began to guide him in processing the fragments. After a whole hour, a brand new storm altar appeared in front of everyone. "Young man, do you desire power?" Duque asked Gavinrad absent-mindedly. Chapter 371. I already believe in the holy light, Gavinrad immediately replied. "I'm not asking you to change your faith. I'm just asking if you're interested in mastering a new, stronger power," Duque replied seriously. "I think I'm strong enough." Gavinrad was a little skeptical about Duque's recommendation. "Come on, I'm not saying that the power of the holy light isn't good, but the power of the holy light lies in the piety of the heart. Your piety is only slightly above average. So even if your foundation isn't bad, you're still the weakest among the first-generation holy knights." Duque immediately hit Gavinrad's sore spot. In terms of martial arts, Gavinrad wasn't much worse than the other three. The only person whom Gavinrad was convinced of was Dathrahan. But the power of the holy light came from the heart. The more pious one was, the more passionate one was about the holy light, and the stronger the holy light. After being blessed by the holy light, Uther became the one who could fight the most. He was tied with Turalian for second to last. Well, the weakest was Reginald Windsor. Okay, what power is that? The power of the storm. More accurately, the power of thunder. At this moment, Gavinrad was tempted. This had nothing to do with the characteristics of the holy knight profession. On one hand, it was a matter of potential. This was the path of the holy light. He had reached the end of it. He wasn't as good as the best, but he could not become the best. On the other hand, as a knight from Stormwind City, Gavinrad Bad Luck had good virtues and a martial family heritage. And the fundamental difference between him and Uther and the other first-generation holy knights was hatred. The hatred of being slaughtered by the orcs. Every family in the country had victims, and every Stormwind citizen had a deep hatred for the orcs. His little grudge was nothing much, but the path of the holy light did not allow for personal hatred. Gavinrad could only suppress the anger in his heart and try to numb himself, telling himself that it was a selfless battle. In reality, he had failed. So his holy light power was near the bottom among the first-generation holy knights. "If I'm not wrong, you can become a storm knight. Are there any risks?" "Calm down. When you're in danger, won't you activate invincibility?" "Oh, activate Holy Shield technique." With that thought, Gavinrad decided to do it. With the same trepidation as the ogre, Gavinrad stood at the center of the altar. At this time, everyone was shocked to find that the altar was still in a state of being unable to be activated. According to the simplest estimation, it would take 5 pharaohs to activate. At this moment, Duque put on a magnificent performance. True mirror image. Duque's figure suddenly became blurry, and a blue Duque walked out from Duque's body. It was obvious that the one who walked out was a doppelganger. However, in less than a tenth of a second, the doppelganger that walked out of the doppelganger's body was quickly dyed with real colors, like a child playing a coloring game. In the blink of an eye, it was impossible to tell the difference between the doppelganger and the original Duque. 2 Duques came out, then 3 Duques. In the end, a total of 5 Duques walked out of the original body. Unlike the Orc Sword Saint's rigid mirror image, which had the exact same movements as the original body, Duque's doppelganger seemed to be completely independent of the original body. They took different steps, and Duque, who was walking to the furthest position, jogged over. The 2 further away were walking at a brisk pace, while Duke's avatar, who was closest to them, was practically crawling. Different expressions, different movements. Such a vivid performance left the Windrunner sisters speechless. Second sister, are my eyes playing tricks on me? Why does it look like there are many brothers-in-law?" Sasha shook her second sister's shoulder in astonishment, not even realizing that she had used the wrong address. It was also Sylvana's first time seeing this divine skill of Duque's. She tried her best to observe and spread out her senses, and only after a while did she realize the difference between the doppelganger and the original body. The doppelganger did not breathe, and there was no smell. However, the doppelganger had a real body. She felt the air that the doppelganger created when it moved forward, forming a weak wind. Aurelia was dazzled, and very naturally, she remembered the first time she met Duque. It was a chance encounter, and she thought that she had met a ghost, but she found a magical mage seedling. And when Duque was killed for the second time, she happened to witness it. To be honest, she still had not figured out what happened back then. But now, she felt that most of her doubts were explained. Duque was definitely a super magic genius. Of course, no one knew that Duque had killed the chief of the Fireblade clan, Sword Saint Dar Triple Bloodblade, to get mirror image of truth. After everything was ready, the 5 doppelgangers of Duque began to cast spells at the same time, under the control of the system elf. The principle was not much different from controlling Hand of Magic. In the eyes of others, it was cool. 5 doppelgangers that could chant different spells at the same time. With this talent, this magical method, the Windrunner sisters began to understand why Duque could rise so quickly in such a short time. It was almost the same as when Gul'dan activated the altar. But because the pollution of the altar had been dispelled by Archbishop Fail, the tornado in the sky was golden and white. The mighty power of the lightning in the sky was broken down into countless threads and entered Gavinrad's body, modifying the body of the first holy knight, who was killed by Earthies in history. Lightning flashed and thunder roared. Such a large-scale phenomenon could not be hidden from anyone. 40 kilometers away, Gul'dan, who was breaking the second runestone defense line in the Longsong Forest, was suddenly alarmed. Someone actually restored the storm altar. That's impossible. You guys go and take a look. Unfortunately, Gul'dan Google and the few remaining warlocks of the Shadow Council were busy. They planned to use a new batch of runestones to build a new altar, and could not leave at all. Having no choice, Gul'dan could only order Talon Gorfiend, the first Death Knight in the world who had been strengthened by the storm altar, to go and take a look. Distance was an important factor. Warlocks did have the ability to teleport teammates across space through the means of summoning, but the premise was that there was a warlock on their side and 2 allies at the destination. Now, there was not a single tribe within 10 kilometers of Duque. At this time, the modification of Gavinrad was completed. Chapter 372. Gavinrad now had a hammer. It was his original physical hammer, as well as the Tempest hammer, which was formed by the power of lightning in his left hand. Walking out of the altar, every step Gavinrad exuded a terrifying power that was no weaker than Thunderstrike. With his feet as the center, large amounts of lightning spread out from the cracked ground. Tiny pieces of earth floated into the sky, ignoring gravity, but were turned into dust by the lightning that Gavinrad released in midair. Gavinrad was full of style now. This aura was no weaker than that of the Burning Legion's boss. Even if someone told Duque that Gavinrad Misfortune was the real boss behind the scenes, if Duke didn't know what was going on, he would definitely believe 80% of it. Unfortunately, Gavinrad's own words revealed the secret. Perhaps the iron rule of not being cool for 3 seconds worked. Gavinrad actually asked, Boss Duque, will I electrocute my wife when I marry her in the future? The Windrunner sisters almost fell off the tree. Annoyed, Duque rolled his eyes. Idiot, can't you learn how to control your power? If that really happens, you can just marry a female holy knight. She won't die from electrocution. Duque didn't finish his sentence. If you're so stupid that you can't control your power, then when you do the life inheritance ritual with your wife, you can bathe her in holy light. Young man, it's a good thing to be full screen censored in battle. Duke didn't bother with Gavinrad anymore, and sent him to watch over the place. Time is limited. Which Windrunner wants to be the next to obtain power? Gul'dan has already destroyed the runestone's energy field. In another half a day, the energy will dissipate without use. Also, this is the power passed down by the High Elves for thousands of years. The four Windstalker sisters looked at each other, none of them able to move their feet. Duka's next sentence caused the two sisters to be unable to remain calm. This is the Storm Altar. An altar that can awaken the power of those with suitable attributes. There are only 3 types of awakenings: thunder, fire, and wind. The power of the wind. This was a temptation that no Windrunner could resist. Once upon a time, the Windrunner were proud of their unparalleled archery skills. In their hearts, there was nothing that they could not kill with a single arrow. Unfortunately, more and more powerful monsters overturned their thoughts. A Death Knight who wouldn't necessarily die, even if his head was pierced through. An ogre with 2 heads and 3 hearts. According to Duque, in the Draenor world where the orcs were originally from, there was a powerful creature that ruled over the ogres. Their name was Gollin. These terrifying creatures usually had a height of more than 10 meters, a huge body, and unparalleled brute force. In the coming days, they were likely to become the orcs' tools of war. They couldn't imagine the terrifying behemoth rampaging through the elven battle formation. Improving himself was already an urgent need. In addition, it was the power of the wind, the Windrunner's prime power. There was no way to refuse. As the eldest sister, Aurelia was the first to stand up. Duque, is this power safe? Duque sighed. This is the power left behind by your high elf ancestors. It has even been purified by the holy light. Alright, I'll go first. When I'm sure it's safe, I'll let you guys come too. Aurelia's beautiful figure stood in the center of the altar. Duque quickly began to cast the spell. After a short spell, there was no terrifying lightning and thunder like when Gavin Rad was awakened. Instead, a gentle whirlwind appeared around Aurelia. It was gentle and soft, like a mother caressing her child and murmuring a nursery rhyme in her ear. The feeling of the breeze caressing their faces was very comfortable. It was so comfortable that everyone present felt like falling asleep. Everyone heard the sound of the wind. Huff, huff, huff. It was the pulse of the earth and the breath of the sky. Gently opening her arms, Aurelia let her whole body bathe in the wind. In the wind, there was the scent of grass, the fragrance of the earth, and the unique fragrance of the forest. Listening to the sound of the wind and receiving its teachings, Aurelia was in a trance, as if she was intoxicated. The rapid energy reaction on the altar gradually subsided. The 3 Windrunner sisters watched their eldest sister, who was sitting down in the middle of the altar, and their hearts tightened. The most rebellious and easily agitated Servanas stared at Duque. Duque made an okay gesture, but then realized that they didn't understand, so he gave a thumbs up. Even though they were relieved, the 3 Windrunner sisters still stared at their eldest sister nervously. Suddenly Aurelia, who had her eyes closed, stood up. She took out her longbow and pulled the bowstring, but she didn't nock an arrow. Shooting without a bowstring was the foundation of archery. What was their eldest sister doing? Aurelia's next action told everyone the answer. She shot an arrow. When she pulled the bowstring into the shape of a full moon, a gust of wind blew around the altar. The storm was gathering, obeying Aurelia Windrunner's request, voluntarily forming a wind arrow in less than half a second. This wasn't an illusion. The 3 Windrunner sisters saw the scene where the arrow should have been knocked change. Under normal circumstances, such a scene would only occur when the high temperature caused the water vapor on the ground to evaporate, distorting the light. Now it appeared in Aurelia's hands. As the 2 tender fingers loosened, the sound of the bowstring vibrating suddenly rang out. However, there was no sound of the arrow being shot. No one could see the arrow's trajectory clearly. Everyone just instinctively looked in the direction the bow was aimed at. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. When the time reached 3 seconds, there was a reaction 500 meters away. A huge flower of blood bloomed on the treetops. For humans, it was already beyond the limit of their eyesight. To them, it was just a small dot. For the elven rangers with amazing eyesight, it was a huge test. However, the 3 Windrunner sisters saw it. Unparalleled accuracy, a powerful shot. 500 meters away, an arrow pierced through the troll's chest. Starting from the chest, the troll's entire body exploded into countless pieces. It was a troll scout. It wasn't easy to find this guy, who was good at hiding and had the same color as the forest, from 500 meters away. Not to mention this kind of attack that was almost beyond visual range. Aurelia finally opened her eyes, a warm smile on her dignified face. My sisters, I strongly recommend you to explore the limits of your power. Chapter 373. Storms were gathering, and thunder was roaring. Power was surging, and destiny was being rewritten. Duque raised his head and looked at the vast and boundless sea of trees. His deep, black eyes looked past the lush forest, the marching orcs, and finally landed on the tribal flags that were fluttering in the wind like rags. No one knew what Duque was thinking. That sharp divine light that could pierce through all the fog and see the truth was what confused and intoxicated Aurelia the most. Duque's gaze seemed to contain the mysteries of the entire universe. After letting out a soft sigh, the divine light in Duque's eyes became more and more blurred. It was as if he had turned into a bronze dragon that controlled time, making time flow according to his will. It was as if he could see the torrent of history rolling forward according to its original direction, crushing all the hard work he had done. It shackled him with the shackles of time and space, allowing history to return to the path he was familiar with. The mysterious and unfathomable river of destiny seemed to have secretly merged with every river and sea in Azeroth, coiling around every mountain, plain, and continent. The future was like a layer of fog that could never be dispelled, shrouding the entire alliance, and even the entire Azeroth. Duque didn't know how much his hard work could change the future. He could imagine that the current 79% accuracy rate would make the originally fixed future even more fragmented and unpredictable because of his hard work. To make up for those who have passed away, and the regrets that I thought were irreversible, everything is worth it, Duque muttered softly. In the past hour, the people around Duque all received unexpected benefits. Lightning, Servanas shouted, and surging waves of lightning gathered in her palm, turning into lightning arrows that contained great power. The lightning that circled around her made her look like a goddess of lightning that stood above the 9 heavens. Wind soaring, Vanessa had also awakened the power of the wind. Although she couldn't compare to her sister Aurelia in terms of quality and quantity, she was exceptionally light. It wasn't hard to imagine that Vanessa would have an absolute advantage in terms of speed. Eagle Eye, Lilith was a little puzzled. She had awakened this scouting ability. It didn't feel like it had much to do with the wind, and there was almost no increase in combat power. Wind release. Vanessa waved her 2 daggers agilely in the air. The graceful twirls in the air made people wonder if she had already overcome gravity. Ice mist. After dispelling the influence of the wind, Alicia easily condensed a cold mist in the air and enveloped herself. When the people around her finished upgrading, they all turned to look at Duque. Dooku, even though the horde is almost here, we can help you hold them off for at least 10 minutes. If there's anything else you can get, just do it. Illyria's encouragement came from the wind. The other 3 Windrunner sisters nodded in unison. Duke smiled. He first opened a portal and sent Alicia and Vanessa, the 2 weaker ones, back. He then stood on the storm altar. After standing on it, Duque couldn't help but laugh. Once upon a time, he had been worried about the gains and losses of even the most basic level 1 fireball spell. Now that he was faced with an unknown power, Duque was surprised to find that he didn't seem to have much hope or fear for the final outcome. Perhaps it was because he had changed from a simple transmigrator to a university. After experiencing numerous challenges and hardships, he had completely matured. He had worried countless times that if history had changed drastically, he would lose his judgment of the future. But after ascending to a high position and commanding the Alliance's army to victory time and time again, his heart was becoming more determined. He began to have confidence and was no longer afraid of failure or setbacks. Thinking about the forces that would invade Azeroth in the future, and the terrifying monsters that could easily be as tall as a 10-story building, he was originally a little afraid. But now, the results of his hard work were turning into a source of confidence. the power of magic, the power of power, the support of friends and subordinates. All of these turned into an indescribable confidence that supported him to continue moving forward. As long as he grasped this power, he would have endless power to overcome all obstacles, break through the fate of destruction, dispel the fog in front of him, and embark on the path of the bright future. That was the fate of Azeroth and Duque's fate. With that thought, Duque no longer hesitated. The 5 avatars chanted a simple incantation, driving the temporarily made storm altar to make its final effort. The force of nature deep in the ground, that was about to dissipate, was surging for the last time, under the guidance of Duque's will. The feedback from various parts of the altar allowed the force of earth to connect with his body, giving him a feeling that the force of earth was connected to his fate and magic circuit. The next moment, a strong gust of wind blew in the sky again. Countless drifting forces in the air gathered in the direction of the storm altar, in an even more exaggerated and majestic manner than the people who had awakened before. It was a giant tornado that hovered 100 meters in the air and had a diameter of more than 5 kilometers. For a moment, Aurelia and the others all turned to look at it. Countless long purple-blue lightning bolts were twisting in the air above the storm altar like spiritual snakes. The high-energy lightning chains disintegrated and filtered all impurities, making the wind blowing on the altar extremely cool and clean. The cool breeze wrapped around Duque's limbs and blew away all the dirt on Duque's body. The lightning came to Duque's head and turned into countless tiny harmless electric currents that entered Duque's shoulders and flowed throughout Duque's body. The strange feeling of the lightning entering his body was not the numbing feeling of destruction that he had imagined. Instead, it was a little strange. In the slightly numb feeling, Duque felt that his body was becoming more and more resilient under the stimulation of the electric currents. And the special understanding of wind, lightning, and fire began to spread to the depths of his soul. This was not an empty experience that came through incantations or spells. This was the most direct and unobstructed contact with the force of nature. It was precisely because of this rare experience that he had rooted in the deepest part of his heart that the power of his magic would definitely reach a higher level. In Duque's vision, the emerald green system notification was jumping wildly along with the surging storm power in the air. Congratulations, host, you have mastered the power of wind and lightning. You have comprehended and mastered the special improved spell, Thunder Spear. You have mastered the thunderstorm wall. You have mastered the electric shield. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.